Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3.
Hello. Test, test, test. All right, members of council, I think we're going to get started here. Perfect. So we have audio, but not video? We got both. We got both. Okay, perfect. All right. I think we're just waiting on member Russell. There she is. All right. There we go. All right. I think we are now back. Thank you very much. We're just going to get right back into the agenda. We left off at agenda item 6. This is the Affordable Housing Task Force interviews. I've been told that Ms. Reyes needs to move up. She has a conflict at a later time, so we're going to bump up Ms. Reyes if she's available now.
Is both video and audio working?
Correct, yes. So for members of the public and those here in the room, we have both audio and visuals available on the streaming feed. So good evening, Ms. Reyes. Good evening. So thank you very much for participating in the interview tonight. We're going to ask you a series of 7 questions. You'll have 10 minutes to answer the questions. I'll go ahead and keep time on my phone. Okay. If there's any time remaining at the end of the 7 questions, you're free to ask council any questions. And for just simplicity tonight, members of council, I'll start with question 1, and we'll just go around the room here as a horseshoe. And we will get started. So Ms. Reyes, do you have any questions before we get started?
No, thank you very much.
Perfect. So Ms. Reyes, my first question to you is, why are you interested in the topic of affordable housing, and what motivated you to pursue an appointment to the task force? Second part to that is, have you served in a similar volunteer capacity in the past for the City of Englewood or any other city?
Okay, thank you. So to begin, I myself grew up in low-income housing. I spent the first 18 years of my life primarily in Sheridan, which is really close to Englewood. So I grew up in low-income apartments, and I'm very thankful for them because it gave my single mother a place to raise me. I graduated from Englewood High School. My children attend Englewood schools. I worked for Englewood schools for 16 years, and I currently rent in Englewood, and I just really love Englewood. I love the community, and I see that there is a problem with housing. I know because I've experienced it. My family, we have almost been homeless just because of the housing situation, not being able to buy, it being hard to rent, it being unattainable. And so we've been fortunate enough to have a wonderful landlord for the past about 7 years here in Englewood, and we quite enjoy Englewood. We love being here. I've never been on a committee like this, so this would be a first time for me, but it's something that I'm deeply vested in, not only for myself, but for, every person in the City of Englewood.
Thank you so much, Ms. Reyes. Member Anderson.
Good evening, Ms. Reyes. My question for you is accessibility to housing of all types and cost ranges is increasingly cited as a major challenge to the long-term health and vitality of the Denver region. Some cities are actively encouraging and even investing in affordable housing developments, and other cities have not made the issue a priority. What role should Englewood play?
I feel like the City of Englewood should work its best to find resolutions for these problems, knowing that unfortunately they might not be able to solve all of the problems because there are some things that are out of the city's hands, like wages and just overall things like when you look at like the cost of living and the federal poverty wages, which unfortunately are not an accurate reflection of in our area as to what is considered poverty. Because if you looked at inflation, and if our poverty guidelines had actually rose appropriately with inflation, we would see that even what we look at things like what is, affordable, we can't adjust things like federal poverty guidelines. So knowing like we're going to have to be strategic in the way we look at this problem and also make sure we're looking through the lenses of every kind of person in Englewood. We have so many different stakeholders from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different socioeconomic backgrounds, and making sure we really do consider those lenses and look at the full picture when we're trying to solve this really tricky problem of affordable housing.
Very good, thank you.
Member Woodward.
Thank you. My question for you is, how would you define the term affordable housing, and how would you apply your definition in terms of future residential development priorities in Englewood?
Ooh. So I think, again, going back to what I said before, affordable is not really cut and dry. That's a very subjective term in terms of what is affordable. There's times when they say, oh, it's affordable if you're spending less than 30% on your housing. Well, I can tell you my family, we spend 30 to 40%, so it's not affordable for us. And so when I think about what my view of affordable is that families can obtain housing that is appropriate for them. And I say appropriate because we have families who have 6 people living in 1-bedroom apartments and 2-bedroom apartments. And so even though they have affordable housing, it's not appropriate. So I think it should be appropriate housing for them that's also safe, that enables them to pay the rest of their bills. Like they don't have to pick, am I paying water this month or am I paying trash this month? I have been in that situation years ago. I'm lucky I am no longer in that situation, but I know what it's like to be what they call house poor, where majority of your income is going to keep the roof over your head, but you might not have enough money to buy food. So affordable is you have enough for the housing, but also enough expendable income to get all of your basic needs met.
Thank you.
Hi, Amber. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional background and how you would apply your experience to the issues that the task force may examine?
Yes. So I do have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. I was the first in my family to go to college on a Daniels Fund scholarship, which was phenomenal. And there I studied behavioral science, psychology, anthropology, and sociology. And so a lot of those studies really helped me to learn about families and also really understand the effects that income have on families and things like housing. And so I feel like that really brings kind of the people side of things to my view. I'm always a people first person, and I work to put the lenses on of others and look through their view. And if I can't, then have those conversations with them to understand where are they coming from? What are their experiences? And so I feel like my education helps. I am also a teacher. I worked for Englewood Schools for 16 years, and now I'm teaching in Denver Public Schools at Dell Elementary in Southwest Denver, which is kind of very similar to the demographics of the school, are very similar to the Bishop Elementary demographics. And being in education really just helps me to see the impacts that housing can have on students. I have students who come to school and they've slept in the car the night before, or they don't have, electricity, or they lived with their grandma and their parents got in a fight and now they can't live with grandma. So now they're literally homeless because they don't have access to stable, affordable housing. And so I think just coming with the lens of an educator who sees how housing really has a multi-generational impact is huge. Knowing when you think about social mobility, a big factor is housing, having access to safe housing, but also owning a home. Like owning a home is a big step up in social mobility. And unfortunately, that's a step that not a lot of families get. I personally come from a family who has never owned a house. I never knew anybody, who owned a house. So now I'm trying to be the one to do that. But unfortunately, with our housing market, we know that's tricky. And I'm lucky that I am able to rent here in Englewood. So just again, having that lens of a teacher and that background in behavioral science and psychology, I think is just very beneficial.
Time check, we have just a little bit over 2 minutes for the next 3 questions. Go ahead, Member Noonan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. Ms. Reyes, thanks for your patience with us tonight. Opinions held by task force members will vary. How do you handle situations in which someone has a different viewpoint or an opinion than you do? And how would you apply that perspective to your role as a task force member?
Asking questions. I personally love talking to other people that have different opinions because that's how we grow. That is the biggest that is the biggest way we do grow, is by interacting with people who have different opinions from us. Otherwise, we literally can't grow. So I enjoy it. I enjoy discussion and I enjoy debate. And you have to realize that a person is a person and you can't attach their opinion to them. And it always needs to be person first.
What do you hope to accomplish as a member of the task force?
I hope to just help. I hope that, we all can try to figure out some sort of resolution to help this tricky task of figuring out what we do for affordable housing, because there are so many ways this could go, and I don't think it's a this or that. There's so much in between, and I just really want to do my part to share my experiences, but also make sure that I am being a voice for the people of Englewood, for those people who don't typically have voices in situations like that, for those people who have the same experiences I do, that have faced homelessness, that grew up in low-income housing.
Good evening, Ms. Reyes. Is there anything else you would like to share about your interest in and your qualifications for the task force?
Most of all, just I have an attitude of gratitude that this task force is even being formed, because this is a big problem, and I'm just thankful that Englewood is looking at this and that they're including so many different stakeholders in Englewood on this task force. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Ms. Reyes, thank you very much for your time tonight. We're going to deliberate later on tonight on this. And so somebody from the city clerk's office will let you know later on this week about our final appointments, which will be made Monday night. But thank you for giving us an extra hour of your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and are we back to just the regular schedule, just going in right order? Okay, up next is Mr. Joe Phillips. Mr. Phillips, thank you very much for making more time for us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Mr. Phillips, we're going to be asking you a series of 7 questions. You have 10 minutes to answer the 7 questions. If there's any time remaining at the end, you can ask us any questions. And I'll start with the first question, and we'll go around in a horseshoe. So,
Perfect.
Mr. Phillips, my question for you is, why are you interested in the topic of affordable housing, and what motivated you to pursue an appointment to the task force? Second part is, have you served in a similar volunteer capacity for the City of Englewood or any other city?
I believe that housing affordability is the biggest crisis we're dealing with in this country. I think it's a global issue, honestly. I think that when it comes to housing availability and affordability, that ties into obviously our homelessness, the growth in the homeless population here in Englewood and the metro area at large. I also think that the housing affordability also connects directly with inflation, with the higher the prices are, the more the higher housing prices are, the more wages have to increase, which increases services and goods and so on, and it becomes this really nasty cycle. I own Fellow Traveler, a vegan bar and restaurant in downtown Englewood. So as a member of the community, I am concerned about housing for not only my guests, but more importantly, my employees. I have a very, very small number of employees that actually live in Englewood, and the reason is affordability. I have employees that have to travel as far as East Aurora or Arvada to come work in our city here. So yeah, I think that housing affordability and availability also leads to smart city growth. I believe in density, increasing housing density. I think that Englewood is an amazing community and really has the opportunity to grow into something fantastic if we grow smart and can invite more people to the community. I have served before as a citizen representative for Morey Middle School when I lived in Cap Hill years ago. That's as close to something of this capacity.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Member Anderson.
Mr. Phillips, my question for you is, some cities are actively encouraging investing in affordable housing developments, and other cities have not made the issue a priority. How do you think Englewood should approach the issue of affordable housing?
I think we should definitely approach it. This isn't something that can be pushed off to the next community, especially Englewood, which is sandwiched in between so many other municipalities. We are a larger community, the whole metro area. And I think that as far as things that can be done, obviously changes in zoning and building codes. I have been very encouraged by what's been happening recently in New York City in regards to addressing short-term rental issues. I think that we need to make more space for more people. We need more new developments. There are more and more people coming every day, and we need to make room for them.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How would you define the term affordable housing, and how would you apply your definition in terms of future residential development priorities in Englewood?
Well, I think some of the more standard approaches are always pressuring new developments to have a certain number of new units be designated for affordable housing. And that's definitely an approach. But I think we also want to start rethinking about how the communities of the future are going to look like. I know that a lot of new developments, we have to consider parking situations. And we are not that far off from our whole infrastructure changing with the self-driving cars. That will happen within 5 to 10 years probably. Do we really need to mandate that 2 parking lots exist for every unit when people aren't necessarily even going to be relying on 2 vehicles? So, I mean, things of that nature, forward-thinking, more density, more community, a more walkable, bikeable city, I think, would be very helpful.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey, Joe. Can you tell us a little about your professional background? And you said you own fellow traveler, but how would you apply this experience into the issues that the task force might be examining?
As a bar and restaurant owner, I feel that bars and restaurants cater to community, not just communities. We bring people together, and we often hear about people's issues. The old cliche of the bartender psychiatrist is not that far off. People come and share their thoughts with us, so we get to really hear what's going on in people's lives. And I think, you know, when you build a community space, which is what a bar and a restaurant is, you are a servant, and I mean, you are giving service, but you are also a serving the community. So I feel that throughout my years of interacting with the population has been very helpful in getting to know the needs of people.
Time tag, just over 2 minutes for the next 3.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Phillips, thanks for your patience with us this evening. Opinions held by task force membership will vary. How do you handle situations in which someone has a different viewpoint or an opinion than you do? And how would you apply that perspective to your role as a task force member?
Yeah, definitely people have a lot of opinions, and they're all going to be different. I consider myself a open-minded person. I also consider myself someone who is not quick to judgment. I enjoy hearing conflicting views. I think personally I am a type that likes hearing all sides. I really, even things that I necessarily agree with, I want to hear why my idea is wrong, which my wife probably doesn't love, but I do play devil's advocate quite a bit, and I appreciate that in coming back to me as well.
What do you hope to accomplish as a member of the task force?
I hope to have a positive impact on the city of Englewood, and I hope to. I hope that Englewood can be a trailblazer for other communities as well.
And my question is there anything else you would like to share about your interest in and your qualifications for the task force?
I do not have a background in governing outside of years of student council, and that was years and years ago. Like I said earlier, I believe this is the most important issue facing this country right now, and yeah, I'm passionate about that.
Mr. Phillips, thank you very much for your 10 minutes tonight. And no, actually your extended time tonight. We're going to deliberate later on tonight. We'll make final placements on Monday night, the actual vote. So you'll hear from somebody from city council, or excuse me, from city staff later on this week about potential appointments. So thank you very much for your time tonight, and appreciate you wanting to serve your city.
My pleasure. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Up next is Andrea King. And members of council, the next person, Stephanie Kalk, is not able to make it, so we'll be moving to John Hurst after Andrea. Good evening, Ms. King. Thank you very much for making time for us and staying late tonight. Apologies for the delay. My name is Othaniel Sear. I'm mayor for the City of Englewood. We're going to ask you 7 questions. You have 10 minutes to answer those questions. If there's any time remaining at the end, you're free to ask council any questions. I guess, and I'll be keeping time here as well. Do you have any questions before we get started?
No.
So, Ms. King, my first question for you is, why are you interested in the topic of affordable housing and what motivated you to pursue an appointment to the task force? Second part to that is, have you served in a volunteer capacity for Englewood or any other city?
Sure. So I grew up on the Front Range, and I've watched the community change significantly. And in some ways, it's been really great, and there's been really great opportunities that have come to Colorado and grown with the state. And in other ways, I've found it to be concerning as the cost of living has increased dramatically, the population has increased dramatically, and there's been a lag in affordable housing and housing in general. And so me personally, seeing and having concerns for the community, I want to be involved in making sure that people in Colorado have access to housing and affordable housing. And as far as volunteer work, I have yet to volunteer with Englewood. However, I have experience with several electoral races, volunteers in police service with Denver, and working with homeless youth in Jefferson County and homeless families in Weld County.
Thank you, Ms. King. Go ahead, Member Andrew.
Good evening, Ms. King. Accessibility to housing types of all types is a growing problem in the metro area. Some cities are encouraging investing in affordable housing developments, and other cities haven't made the issue a priority. How do you think Englewood should approach the issue?
I think Englewood has a really exciting opportunity to get ahead in some ways and help guide development in our city. I've noticed that a lot of really great things about Englewood have stayed the same, and I've noticed that things have changed a lot in the last year. So I think helping to review city ordinances, to work with developers, to look at opportunities for increasing multifamily unit housing is really important, and opportunities for preserving some of our historic structures and the culture and community here is something that we can do, whereas I've seen other cities on the Front Range get bulldozed, quite frankly, by developers and corporations, and lose a lot of opportunity and what makes those communities special.
Thank you.
My question is, how would you define the term affordable housing? And how would you apply your definition in terms of future residential development priorities in Englewood?
In my mind, affordable housing means that the people who live here can afford to stay in their homes. The people who want to have their first home here, who want to have an apartment here, who want to have a fresh start here can afford to live here based off normal jobs, not necessarily being in tech, not being in the 1%, being your everyday average Coloradan, working in our community, either at the hospital, in education, all sorts of different jobs, the restaurants in this area, because like living and working in your community is equally important. And there are a lot of communities where people work and they can't afford to live in the community they work in.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Andrea. Can you tell us a little about your professional background?
Sure.
And how you might apply that to the experiences, or these experiences to what the Housing Task Force might examine?
Yeah. So I have a background in HR, benefits, healthcare, compliance, and regulation. I've done all sorts of different jobs in service. So actually right now I host a pub quiz down at Sunroom Brewing. Come see me on Thursdays. And besides my background in HR, I recently left the professional world and I've gone back to school for nursing. And I'm doing an externship up the street at Swedish. So Being part of this community is important to me, and bringing my background in policy and working with stakeholders and project development, learning how to be a nurse and doing assessment and working with people in our community is all things that I think I can bring to this task force.
Ms. King, thanks for your patience with us this evening. Opinions held by the task force membership will vary. How do you handle situations in which someone has a different viewpoint or opinion than you do? And how would you bring that perspective to your role as a task force member?
Sure. My first degree is in cultural anthropology. One of the best things I learned is that the best way you can help people and to be part of positive change is to open your mind, open your ears, and shut your mouth. And so listening to different perspectives is important. I have a friend who went to school in Chicago, and we were talking one day about how in Chicago, people can't spend the equivalent like food stamps at liquor stores. Makes sense off the bat, right? However, a lot of people who would spend food stamps at liquor stores live in a food desert, and the only place that carries food is a liquor store. So thinking about things in a bigger picture and not just like oh, right off the cuff, you're right, you shouldn't be able to spend food stamps at a liquor store. But, oh, it's a food desert. This is where people can get access to food. How do we help grow that store? How do we help grow opportunities for people to get food in that community? And thinking about it from that perspective and listening first to like, why is this so-called problem here? What are the different perspectives, and what can we do to make it a situation where ultimately everybody wins because the community gets better, right?
What do you hope to accomplish as a member of the task force?
Englewood has a really special place in my heart. I was born at Swedish. I work at Swedish. Obviously, I'm becoming quite the townie. My grandparents met at the corner of Sherman and Bates. My grandma owned a boarding house there, and my grandpa was one of the boarders. So they started their family here. And I think that this is a really special community, and I see that there's such cool programs here already, like the Englewood Trolley. How fun is that you can just hop on and ride around the neighborhood? All of the block parties that are happening, and like that you can rent and do a movie in the backyard. I just see a lot of community and opportunity to continue to grow that community. And keep this a really special place.
Good evening, Ms. King. Is there anything else you would like to share about your interest in and your qualifications for the task force?
I'm enthusiastic, a hard worker. I like seeing communities thrive. I like seeing people win. And by win, I mean be in their houses, live their lives, live their values, and connect with each other. Working with homeless kids and homeless families, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing somebody be able to get the services they need in their community and get back to living in their community and having their own home. I think that transitional living programs create strong safety networks in the neighborhood and for the people who contribute to them and can benefit from them. Because, you know, a lot of us are just a paycheck away from losing it all, or a major health incident from losing it all. And so I think coming to things with the perspective of we're not doing this for the vulnerable, or we're not just doing this for person who can't afford it. We're doing it for all of us, because in one way or another, at one point in our lives, we can all be vulnerable. And so when we think about it from that lens and think about it as something that helps everyone, I think we all benefit. And that's that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. King, you still have about a minute. Do you have any questions for us?
I don't. I'm going to skedaddle so that you can get on with all the wonderful people in the hallway waiting to talk to you.
Well, Ms. King, thank you very much for making time for us tonight. Thank you for the extended time that you gave us tonight and for your willingness to volunteer. We're going to deliberate tonight. We'll make a final decision next Monday night. And then you'll hear from somebody from the city clerk's office in terms of final placements. So thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a good evening.
Have a good night. Up next is Mr. John Hurst. Good evening, Mr. Hurst.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks for making time for us tonight. We're going to be asking you a series of 7 questions. You have 10 minutes to answer those questions. If there's any additional time left over, you can ask a question of City Council. I'll start with the first question, and then we'll go around the room. So are you ready to begin?
Yeah, that's great.
Timer starts. So first question is, why are you interested in the topic of affordable housing, and what motivated you to pursue an appointment to the task force? Second part to that is, have you served in a similar volunteer capacity in the past for the city or any other city?
Yeah, definitely. I love the city. I have lived in Englewood for 5.5 years. I have worked here for 7.5 years. And I know firsthand as being a renter here for 5.5 years, how hard it is, especially in a housing market that continues to rise and get more and more expensive. Me and my wife would love to not be renters, but instead own a house. But we see no path forward in that kind of realm as things stand now. For us, it's been difficult, but I'm also incredibly passionate about affordable housing, just for the sake of my neighbors who are severely cost burdened, who are having a hard time even renting and affording other basic necessities. So I am really passionate and care about providing a way for everyone who lives in the city to thrive and be able to afford not only just a place to live, but other basic necessities as well. I have not served in any kind of role similar to this before, so that's one of the things that excites me about potentially being on this task force, is just to be able to serve my city in a new way.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Hurst. Accessibility to housing types is increasingly cited as a major challenge in the Denver metro area. Some cities are taking an active role in affordable housing developments, and others are not making the issue a priority. How do you think Englewood should approach the issue?
Yeah, I think Englewood absolutely should invest in affordable housing solutions. I think it's very clear that relying on the market itself to provide affordable housing at some rates to those who are cost burdened or severely cost burdened is just unreasonable, and it never works. The system that we live in necessitates that companies maximize the profits if they can, and in a hotly contested housing market, they will. So I think it is the role of the local government, in this case, in moments like this, when we have a significant number of people who cannot afford housing, or at least afford sustainable housing for their household to provide all the needs, for all the needs that they have. I think it's important for the city to invest in ways for those folks to thrive as well. So I absolutely believe that the city should be involved in those decisions. At the very least, look at the options available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question for you is, how would you define the term affordable housing? And how would you apply your definition in terms of future residential development priorities in Englewood?
Yeah, I think affordable housing applies both to renters and to first-time home buyers. For renters, I believe affordable housing is any housing that allows those who are cost burdened or spending more than 30% of their gross income on housing to no longer be cost burdened, or at the very least, for those folks to be significantly less cost burdened than they currently are, paying for housing that's at the current market levels. For folks who would be first-time home buyers, I think affordable housing is any housing that significantly lowers the barrier to entry for buying a home. And I personally would benefit a lot from any solutions. Not just me, though, a lot of people that I know as well. I think most importantly is for folks who are severely cost burdened and really just need a roof over their heads that they can sustainably pay for. And I think That would be my definition, yeah.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little about your professional background and how you might apply that experience to the issues that the task force might examine?
Yeah, I work in the film industry, and so early in my career, I worked on a lot of documentaries, oftentimes with subjects who came from families who were severely cost burdened. So I got to see firsthand and hear lots of stories around the struggles surrounding folks who were paying significantly more than even 50% of their gross income on housing. The lack of opportunities that they had to provide for their kids, for all their households and even themselves was humbling, to say the least. And so I've seen that up close, kind of the harms of a housing market that does not allow for people to thrive who are not making even anywhere close to area median income. And then currently I'm working at a video production company, and we literally have a client right now who is a bank who is actively investing in affordable housing projects all across the state of Colorado and in Arizona. So I have interviewed lots of executives and other people involved in these projects all over the state. And so I feel like that qualifies me a lot. I've seen how some banks are investing in this, and I think I could add to the conversation on that level as well.
Mr. Hurst, thanks for your patience with us tonight. Opinions held by task force membership will vary. How do you handle situations in which someone has a different viewpoint or opinion than you do, and how would you apply that perspective to your role as a task force member?
Yeah, I absolutely recognize that I will disagree with one, if not everyone on the task force at one point or another. I think overall that's a very good thing. I think that it is more representative of our community if we do have healthy disagreements. I think that we will come to better solutions that work for more people. And so at the end of the day, although it will be hard when we do disagree, I know that I will approach the situation with the utmost respect and dignity for my fellow task force members. And I would seek to have just a healthy, good conversation. I would be open to changing my mind if there was a better solution or thought brought to me. But I realize I don't have every perspective in my mind. I've only lived my own life. And there are a lot of people who have different opinions and things I've never even considered. So I would really highly value a diversity of thought.
What do you hope to accomplish as a member of the task force?
I really would hope to find some simple solutions to this extremely high cost housing market. So I would love to be able to suggest and recommend things to you, council, to actually implement moving forward to help both on the renting front and on the first-time homebuyer front. I would love to find real solutions that actually help the vast number of people who need help with their housing. So I would just hope to first and foremost be educated on all the things available, but more than that, to actually be able to find some really good solutions to present to you all, and hopefully move forward with those things.
Good evening, Mr. Hurst. So my question, is there anything else you would like to share with us about your interest or your qualifications for the task force?
Not really, other than that I am honored to be considered for the opportunity. I hope to bring, I know there's been a lot of contention in this city around conversations around housing. I would hope to bring a peaceful perspective, and I would just hope to bring level-headedness to the discussion, a mutual respect and dignity to all viewpoints, and really just help my neighbors who are really struggling. That's really what I want.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hurst, you have about a minute left. Any questions for us?
I don't think so.
Well, Mr. Hurst, thank you again for making time for us tonight and staying late. We'll be deliberating later on tonight on this topic and then make final placements next Monday night. and you'll hear from someone from the city clerk's office over the course of the next week on final placements. So thank you again for your time and willingness to serve.
Thank you.
All right. Up next is Cassandra. Is it Michael? Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, Miss Michael.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for making time for us tonight, Miss Michael. Sorry we're running a bit late here by an hour or so, but I'm going to be asking you a series of we're going to be asking you a series of 7 questions. You have 10 minutes to answer those questions. If there's any time remaining, then then you can ask a question of council, and I'll ask the first question, and we'll just go around the room, and I'll be keeping time as well. So are you ready to begin?
I'm ready. Thank you for having me.
Miss Michael, my question for you is, why are you interested in the topic of affordable housing, and what motivated you to pursue an appointment to the task force? Second part to that is, have you served in a similar volunteer capacity for the City of Englewood or any other city?
Thank you for the question. I'm interested in the topic of affordable housing because I think it's one of the biggest issues, not only in our community, but in communities all around the country. And I think everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to live. Having a safe, reliable place to live improves the quality of life, not only for the people in housing, but for communities in general. Affordable housing improves educational outcomes, and the more educated a society is, the better they can improve. I've always been interested in government and governing, and in college I was a part of student government. In my role on student government, I was a representative to the curriculum revision task force at my college. So I represented the students on a faculty committee who was charged with creating a new plan for revising the general education curriculum and presenting like the new requirements to the Board of Regents and creating a plan so that there wouldn't be like another 15-year gap in revising those requirements. And I learned a lot about consensus building, how a group works towards a goal, and the type of learning and considerations that have to be done, and also balancing all the perspectives and all the unique needs of the different stakeholders of a group.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Michael. My question for you is as follows. Accessibility to housing of all types is increasingly cited as a major concern around the metro area. Some cities are actively encouraging investments in affordable housing, and others aren't taking an active role in it. How do you think Englewood should approach the issue of affordable housing?
I think Englewood should invest in affordable housing. I feel like government should exist to serve its citizens and do what's best for its citizens and improve their quality of life. But beyond my own beliefs, I did look at the strategic plan, and I noticed that affordable housing is one of the goals in the strategic plan that was passed by City Council. So the city has decided that that is a goal, and as a task force for the city, I would look to those guiding documents like the strategic plan, mission, vision, when considering recommendations, because what I think is best might not be best for the city, and a group of people has decided that that is a goal for Englewood.
Very good, thank you.
My question for you tonight is, how would you define the term affordable housing, and how would you apply your definition in terms of future residential development priorities in Englewood?
Great question. When I was in college, I did a service trip where I went to Santa Fe and I got to help build houses with Habitat for Humanity. And while I was there learning more about Habitat for Humanity, I learned the definition of affordable housing as a person is spending no more than 30% of their income on all housing costs. So mortgage, rent, utilities, maintenance, anything for housing would be no more than 30% of a person's income to be affordable. So using that definition for residential development, I think it would be important that everybody come to a shared agreement and definition of affordable housing to work from, because if we're not all talking about the same thing, we can't really be effective. And I think looking at what people are actually paying for their housing costs, and if it is 30% of their income would be important. And it could be things outside of just lowering rent or lowering a mortgage. It could be looking at utility prices and how we could lower that. I know some cities municipalize utilities in order to bring those costs down, because if a city's in charge of the utilities, they don't have to make a profit. And while the cost of producing utilities hasn't been increasing, the prices to citizens for paying Excel is increasing because they have to make a profit for their shareholders. So that's been something that some cities have done to make housing more affordable. That's kind of creative.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your professional background and how you would apply your experience to some of the issues that the task force may address?
Yeah, thank you. I'm an educator. The past 2 years, I taught third grade in a charter school at Aurora. And this year, I've kind of taken a shift, and I'm doing a AmeriCorps service year and teaching reading to kids who struggle in kindergarten to third grade. I think my experience as an educator would be great for being on a task force, because I've had to learn how to balance the unique needs of all my students and meet all their needs, from the kids who need a challenge to the kids who can't access the curriculum. In our community, we have a lot of different people from different backgrounds, and everybody has different perspectives and different needs. And I think my experience being an educator has helped me learn how to listen to those needs, helped me learn how to be creative in coming up with solutions that can balance those different needs.
Time check, just under 3 minutes for the next three.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Michael, thank you for your patience with us this evening. Opinions held by task force members will vary. How do you handle situations in which someone has a different viewpoint or opinion than you do, and how would you apply that perspective to your role as a task force member?
Thank you. I try to listen to understand and listen to people who have different opinions than me to learn. I really value it when someone shares their opinion that's different than mine, because I view it as a learning opportunity. I'm always questioning what I believe and why I believe it, and if there's a different way to do that. When it comes to decision making, I like to make my decisions based on data and evidence. So whether that's a group of experts coming to a consensus on a theory, or whether that's looking at comparable cities and what they've done that has worked and wouldn't work, and then taking that and tweaking it to fit Englewood's unique needs. I like to consider those things as well as people's lived experiences.
What do you hope to accomplish as a member of the task force?
I hope to create a plan to bring to City Council that will create more affordable housing, and a plan to continually address the issue of affordable housing in the future. And I hope that it would improve the quality of life for all citizens in Englewood.
Good evening, Ms. Michael. My question, is there anything else you would like to share with us about your interest or your qualifications for the task force?
just that I really love living in Englewood. I love the sense of community I get here. I grew up in the metro area, and in other areas of the metro area, I don't get that same sense of community as I get here. And I think the city does a great job of promoting that with the different events and with things like the Englewood Summer Drama Program, which I've been a part of. And I'm hoping that I can continue to afford to live here because I think Englewood's just a really great city. And you all have done a great job of building the city and making it a great place to live. So thank you for that.
And thank you.
Ms. Michael, we're just about time, 5 seconds here. So thank you very much for making time for us tonight. We're going to be deliberating a little bit later this evening, and then we'll make final placements a week from tonight. And you'll hear from the city clerk's office about final placements. So thank you again for your extended time tonight, and we'll be in touch. And thank you very much for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Up next is Sophia King. Good evening, Ms. King.
Good evening.
We're going to be asking you a series of questions tonight, or a series of 7 questions. You have 10 minutes to answer those questions. If there's any time remaining at the end, you can ask a question of City Council. I'll go ahead and keep time. I'll ask the first question, and then we'll go around the room here as a horseshoe. After I ask my question and get your answer, I'm going to just excuse myself and blow my nose. So I'm just having a hard time with the allergies right now. So are you ready to begin?
I'm ready.
Thank you. Ms. King, first question for you is, why are you interested in the topic of affordable housing, and what motivated you to pursue an appointment to the task force? Second part to that is, have you served in a similar volunteer capacity in the past for this city or for any other city?
I have never served in a position like this for this city or another city in the past, but I am very passionate about the topic of affordable housing and just generally getting involved and engaged in the community that I live in. And I was listening to the city council meeting from the 11th, and this topic came up. And I became very, very interested in getting involved and learning more about it. Since then, that interest has grown. I've lived in Denver for 3 years. 2 of those years I worked at a nonprofit food pantry. So I was managing a food pantry at Vivint Health and interacting directly with people who are affected by housing insecurity on the day-to-day. And I think that experience really crystallized for me a strong desire to get involved and, just be part of decisions that are made that affect our community.
Good evening, Ms. King. My question for you is accessibility to housing of all types is increasingly cited as a major challenge in the Denver metro region. Some cities are actively encouraging or even investing in affordable housing, and other cities have not made the issue a priority. How do you think Englewood should approach the issue of affordable housing?
I think that for me, it would be a high priority and something that I would want to, increase access to housing as someone who has been renting for my whole adult life and, trying to save to hopefully one day own a home of my own and watching prices rise and watching interest rates go up and, just meeting a lot of challenges and having your rent increased. I think that my personal experience of being someone that has rented for all of this time, I think it's very important that we give a voice to the people in that situation and make sure that they feel represented and protected in their rental relationships.
Thank you.
Good evening. My question tonight is, how would you define the term affordable housing? And how would you apply your definition in terms of future residential development priorities in Englewood?
I think the definition would have to be a relative one. You would have to be considering where we're coming from to where we're going to. So we're kind of adapting to the environment that exists. And I think that gains in affordability are a great thing. And I think I'm overall someone that appreciates compromise and trying to do the most good with what's accessible. And so I think that having concrete changes made that increase affordability or accessibility to good, safe housing is a good thing.
Good, thank you.
Hi, Sophia. Can you tell us a little about your professional background and how you'd apply those experiences to the issues the task force is examining?
Sure. So I spent most of my professional life managing restaurants. I lived in New York for about 8 years, managing restaurants in the city, and relocated to Denver in 2020. And a lot of my experiences working in the restaurant industry, seeing the inequity, and seeing, people struggle to get by while working very hard, definitely over time kind of strengthened my desire to get involved in community and help people where I could. And so when I relocated to Colorado, it was really important to me to work in the nonprofit field and worked at a food pantry for a couple of years, and really kind of continued to see the systemic problems that people face, and learned a lot about, just the accessibility to food and housing and things that people need in their day-to-day lives. And I think that my interest in those needs that people have and compassion for that is something that I would bring to this position. But I also am someone with a background in management and budget managing and, real world decision making. And I think I would bring definitely a grounded perspective, in addition to one that wants to do the most good possible and hopefully balance that. Thanks.
Ms. King, thanks for your time with us this evening. Opinions held by task force membership will vary. How do you handle situations in which someone has a different viewpoint or an opinion than you do, and how would you apply that perspective to your role as a task force member?
Absolutely. Definitely one thing that I did a lot of managing restaurants was conflict management, and interacted with a lot of different people and managed a lot of different people that thought differently about how things should be. And so I've worked with tons of different kinds of people, and I have found ways to find a common ground and move forward and keep a cool head and a good perspective, even when, heads might be getting a little heated. So I think that as well as my experience in the food pantry and, working with a lot of different kinds of individuals to find the best way forward for them, I think I'm uniquely qualified to interact with other people, state my opinions in ways that are clear and impactful, but not muddy the waters. I try to get to the core of something, and I try to understand something fully before I have a strong opinion about it. So I'm pretty open.
What do you hope to accomplish as a member of the task force?
I think mainly I hope to give my time and my thought and my care to fully understanding what is possible and what my own feelings are about what we should strive for, and hopefully enact as much as possible. I mean, I think that having concrete action items or policy changes that are achieved would be an amazing thing and something to strive for.
Good evening, Ms. King. So my question is there anything else that you would like to share about your interest in or your qualifications for the task force?
I I've really enjoyed my time living in Englewood so far. I really like it here. I love my neighborhood. I have been excited to listen to council meetings and get kind of up to date with things that are going on here. And I think it's awesome that so many people are involved in their local government. And I think that I would like to be part of that. And I think that this particular issue is one that I care a lot about and something that I know has a huge impact on people's lives in city and local government. And I think it's a great way to be involved. And I know I would bring definitely my open mind and all of my past experiences to do my best to support.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Ms. King, you still have about a minute left. Do you have any questions for us?
I wanted to know if, I know the list of items that are goals for the Affordable Housing Task Force, but is there any one thing that you think will be a primary focus of the task force or something that you think will be a top priority?
Does anybody want to jump in with their perspective? Member Newnenkamp?
Sure, I'm happy to weigh in here. It's a great question. A few things that this council has prioritized is we did our housing needs assessment last fall, so we actually have some data about where we have our biggest gaps. And one of the recommendations that came out of that process was using that data to help define what our affordable housing goals are, and then how do we build a plan around that so that we can know what we're shooting for, and then how do we get there, as well as Englewood has applied for funding through the state through Proposition 123 that passed on the ballot last year, where we can actually access some state funding if we commit to raising our affordable housing stock by a certain amount. And so the question is, how do we do that, and how do we do that well with an integrated perspective from our citizens? So those are some of the things that we're excited to see this task force weigh in on.
Awesome.
I think that takes us to time. Ms. Whitaker, that's up next. Ms. King, thank you very much for your time tonight. We'll be deliberating later on tonight in terms of who will get placed on this task force. You'll hear from somebody from staff over the next week, and I do appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And up next is Mr. Whitaker. Good evening, Mr. Whitaker.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Mr. Whitaker, thank you very much for making time for us tonight. We're going to be asking you a series of 7 questions. You have 10 minutes to answer those questions. If there's any leftover time, you can ask a question of City Council. I'll start with the first question, and we'll go around in a horseshoe. Any questions before we get started?
Nope, I think I'm good.
All right, Mr. Whitaker, I'll start the time now. My question for you is, why are you interested in the topic of affordable housing, and what motivated you to pursue an appointment to the task force? Second part is, have you served in a similar volunteer capacity for this city or any other city?
Yeah, so I'll go for the first one first. I work at Habitat for Humanity of Metro Denver. I've been there 12 years. I'm the director of real estate. So I have a lot of experience in affordable housing development, especially affordable homeownership development. And one thing we've recognized at Habitat is that we need to be part of community processes such as these to advocate for affordable housing and affordable homeownership and inform the process of what is feasible in order to actually develop and find solutions for affordable housing. And so that was the impetus to joining this. Habitat in Denver has had experience in Englewood. We've built over on the hill quite a bit in the past, and we actually own a property over there that we are currently working to develop right now. And then in the past, I've not been a part of a community group such as this in Englewood, but I have been part of neighborhood planning efforts and task forces in Denver.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Whitaker. Accessible to housing of all types and cost ranges is increasingly cited as a major challenge in the Denver metro region. Some cities are actively encouraging and even investing in affordable housing developments, and other cities have not made the issue a priority. How do you think Englewood should approach the issue?
Yeah, I think it's I think Colorado's a local control state, and I think each jurisdiction should look at what their community needs and craft a solution based on their community. Englewood is a very interesting community in that it's, a first-ring suburb, it's landlocked, and so the solutions to solve Englewood's challenges are unique to Englewood, and I think that's kind of the reason for this task force is to really look at, what does Englewood need, and where are the gaps in the continuum. I think the continuum of housing is what's important, and each locality, each jurisdiction should really look at how they can create a healthy continuum of housing, and I think that's where that would go.
Thank you.
Good evening. My question is, how would you define the term affordable housing? And how would you apply your definition in terms of future residential development priorities in Englewood?
That's a great question. Technically, it's spending less than 30% of your monthly income. Untechnically, I think it is stability. It is having a place that is affordable to you, that you can come home to, that that you have longevity at, you have security at, that you're not going to be hopping from school district to school district or from fear that your rent is going up next month or next year. So for me, it's really that stability, and it's what that stability can do to people. What it can do to households. I mean, prolonged stability can really strengthen households and allow people the ability to start planning for the future and investing in their future. And so lots of different housing types can do that, but it's the stability of affordable housing that really does that.
Very good. Thank you.
For sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your professional experience and just how you might apply that to the issues that task force may examine?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said before, I've been with Habitat for about 12 years. And I think you all know probably that in those 12 years, Denver has changed quite a bit. And so what we have done at Habitat has had to get very unique and creative to adapt with those changes. And so what many people know us for is, developing and selling affordable homeownership. But we do many, many other things as well. And so we have had to stay creative with the market to be able to find solutions. And so we also buy and we renovate existing homes and subsidize those and sell those. We do critical home repairs for people to preserve homeownership. So that's existing homeowners that are in neighborhoods that are at risk of gentrification and displacement. Property taxes are going up. And by doing key repairs, we give them the longevity to stay there a little bit longer and have that burden lifted of repairs. We also are building ADUs in the west side of Denver, and so that's a partnership with the Denver Housing Authority, where we are partnering with them to construct affordable ADUs. And so through those 12 years, being at Habitat has allowed me to respond to the challenges of the Denver market and find solutions that really promote more homeownership or preserve existing homeownership.
Mr. Whitaker, thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for your patience with us. As you know, opinions held by task force members on this issue will vary, and we want to know, how would you handle a situation where someone has a different viewpoint or opinion than you do, and how would you apply that perspective if you were on the task force?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the beauty of cities, isn't it? That everybody has a different viewpoint. I have a lot of experience in public forums and public meetings, and I think everybody brings a different opinion, and everybody's opinion should be respected. And I think there's a way to really get down to what people are trying to say and find some common ground between that, and that often becomes a richer final product. So For example, when we approach developments, we like to go and speak to cities, and we like to speak to neighbors, and we like to get input because we feel like that allows us to understand what's going on out there and respond to that, and it creates more buy-in, and it creates a stronger product in the end. And so I would say that applies to a process like this as well.
What do you hope to accomplish as a member of the task force?
Yeah, so we at Habitat and myself are focused on the whole continuum of housing and affordable housing, because if one area of that is not being accounted for, it puts burden on other areas. And so even though we are very focused on affordable homeownership and the positive impacts that makes, we understand that you also need affordable rentals to get the stability to potentially get to a place where you can own a home, and you also need that upper that market rate home ownership and sufficient amount of it so that it alleviates that space. So really trying to put into perspective what all that means and how all that's connected, so that we can actually advocate for more affordable home ownership.
Good evening, Mr. Whitaker. Is there anything else you would like to share with us about your interest in or your qualifications for the task force?
I don't think so. I just want to say that I am excited that you all are taking this leap to do this. I think it's really important for cities to do this and kind of take stock of what their housing needs are and what approaches they want to take. I think, as I said before, every city's solutions are going to be different because every city is different. So I think this task force will be good to kind of get a baseline and start to figure out what are some possible solutions that fit the needs of Englewood. But no other questions.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Mr. Whitaker, you still have about a minute left. Any questions for us?
I think I'm good.
All right. Well, Mr. Whitaker, thank you very much for your time tonight and your willingness to serve. We're going to have a discussion later on tonight. We'll talk about final placements tonight, but we actually won't vote on it until next Monday night. And you'll hear from somebody from city staff as well over the course of the next week. So thank you again for your extended time tonight.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, that concludes this aspect of the evening tonight, the Affordable Housing Task Force interviews. We're moving on to study session items. Do we want to take a short break before we get started? Let's take a 5-minute break. It is 8:18. Let's get back here around 8:23, 8:24. So thank you. Members of council, if you could please be seated. Thank you, everyone. All right. Can you all hear me? All right, everyone, we are ready to begin. Members of the public, we're getting started here. Are you able to hear or?
Yeah, they're pumping up the volume. If you can announce that, because some people at home had a little trouble.
Okay, perfect. Are you able to hear? Waiting for so the city manager let us know that the mics are going to get turned up. They're not loud enough at this point, but we may have to speak up a little bit. But we are now moving on to the 8th agenda item, the first study session topic for the evening. We have Deputy City Manager Tim Dodd, Director of Finance Jackie Loh, and Miss Emily Snyder from Stantec here to present the CIP prioritization process recommendations. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is Tim Dodd, Deputy City Manager. I'll do a really quick introduction of our consultant, and then I'll turn it over to her for the presentation. So, as you all are aware, we've had many discussions with you about how to improve the CIP, or Capital Improvement Program prioritization process. On April 24th, the Director of Finance Jackie Loh and I came before you to discuss a proposal for a new tool and a new process to utilize this year. With your assent, we did utilize those this year. We also then hired Stantec, which is a company that the City of Englewood has used for multiple reasons over multiple years. We were very fortunate to find Ms. Emily Snyder, who's on the call, who has many years of experience in working on CIP programs, most notably with the City of Denver, and she's also, as a consultant, worked with many others. She did a top-down review of our process. She watched City Council meetings, boards and commission meetings. She also did a survey of board and commission members as well as staff. And so she's here tonight to present those findings and to get feedback from you about which recommendations, if any, you would like us to move forward with, or if there's other things you would like us to implement. And I just want to recognize also our finance staff, Director Jackie Loh, Budget Administrator Jenny Nolan, and Budget and Finance Analyst Tyson Thornburg for their assistance in this project. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Emily Snyder, who is on the call. Thank you, Emily, for joining, and I will be going through your slides for you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Tim. That was going to be one of my questions, is I needed to share my screen. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I'll take that as great. Thank you very much. Good evening, members of council. As Tim mentioned, my name is Emily Snyder, and I am a senior manager with Stantec's management and consulting group, specifically related to capital planning and infrastructure funding. Prior to joining Stantec, I was the CIP director for the city and county of Denver, and public infrastructure is something that I'm very passionate about, and I was very excited to be a partner with the City of Englewood in this evaluation of their pilot prioritization process. Next slide, please. Okay. Let me double check. I think this is a little bit different of a presentation, Tim.
Yeah.
Do you want me to share my screen? I have it available as well.
Yeah, I apologize. I think the wrong one was pulled up. So if you're able to do that, that would be great.
Yeah, no problem. Not a problem at all. Hold on just a minute. I hope I have presenter powers. All right. Ooh, let's move that over. All right. Let's see. Can you see my screen? And there should be an agenda. Wonderful. So,
Ms. Snyder, just real quick, Ms. Snyder, so we're able to see within the TV screens, I guess for members of the public, the screen that we have right in front here is not showing the actual PowerPoint. So if you're able to look at the screens, that would be the PowerPoint that Ms. Snyder is showing. So just to confirm, this is what is being shown on the YouTube as well in the streaming? What Ms. Snyder is presenting? Okay. So we're running into an issue. So it is or it is not, Member Kolnick? I'm getting two different answers.
It is.
We're good. All right. Ms. Snyder, go ahead.
All right. Great. Well, for our agenda for the presentation, quick overview of the process and the evaluation activities. We'll go through the feedback, recommendations, some process refinements based on those recommendations for your consideration, and then some final thoughts. So I first thought it was important to just reorient us to the pilot process itself. So it is a 4-step process that included a department review, a new review CIP committee that was a multi-departmental effort that reviewed all of the projects against stated criteria to produce a prioritization score. Then a step for boards and commissions, and then finally a recommendation to City Council for final review and decision. I do want to emphasize that this was applied to the non-enterprise funds, so specifically the Conservation Trust Fund and the Open Space Fund, as well as the Capital Projects Fund and the Public Improvement Fund. I might say CTF, OSF, PIF, CPF, and I will do my best to make sure I do not talk in acronyms. And I also wanted to highlight the timing. So as Tim just mentioned, this was really kicked off mid-April, and it had about a 6-week to 2-month timeline to really result in those recommendations. So very quick.
Just one brief interruption. I apologize. If whoever's driving the Zoom can please minimize the panelist window, it's partially blocking the view. We don't need to see who's on the Zoom call. We just need to see the screen that's being shared.
I'm not sure.
I don't think it would be you, Ms. Snyder. Yeah, I think it's going to be on the city side. So you could continue, Ms. Snyder, but yeah, if someone on city staff can just press the minimize button on the far left on that box, that would get it out of the way. Go ahead, Ms. Snyder.
Sure. Thank you. So Stantec was retained to really provide that independent observation through the process. We reviewed pilot process materials, such as the tools that were being used by the committees themselves. We then observed internal CIP committee, 1 city council meeting, 2 planning and zoning committees, and then also 2 boards and, budget advisory committee meetings. And as such, we also looked at those agenda packets to understand what information was being deliberated on as part of those conversations. We facilitated a 10-question feedback survey that was slightly different depending on the audience, but one directed towards that new internal CIP committee group, and then also to all of the boards and committee members that were asked to participate in the process. A quick note just on the response rate, because it's always important to show, the data, that we did have a very high response rate from those internal stakeholders and a lower response rate from, I believe, almost 40 boards and commissions members that were that received the survey. We performed some follow-up interviews, and we also looked at your strategic plan, which has a lot of alignment in as requested through the pilot process, and the statutory, we'll say, guidance for the boards and commissions themselves, because we did want to make sure that any recommendation that we made was in concert with what those boards and committees' mission and purpose was. So, I think one of, and you saw it with Tim's first slide of the other presentation, the purpose of this pilot CIP prioritization process was to systematically, holistically, objectively review and score proposed CIP projects based on need, impact, and stated strategic priorities. And as one of the respondents put it, the need is the deciding factor, but the need of one department has to be compared against the need of another to figure out which is the most important need. And so how are we doing that is that process and the tools that were used to make those choices. So we asked that question of the internal and external audiences, and the majority of both agreed. Specifically, the internal CIP committee felt very strongly that the process that was instituted was reflective of the purpose. Less so, slightly, for the external boards and commissions. However, less likely related to both timing, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and how they used the tool and the information that we received as part of the use of the tool itself. Of that 10-question survey that was distributed for about a little over a 2-week timeline, we received some additional insights. And I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the process and the tools. Both the CIP committee and the boards knew their step in the process, but were not as knowledgeable necessarily in other steps, which created some ambiguity in their roles, as well as how they used the prioritization tools itself. All responded saying that the tool worked, but they each, in our observation, used the tool slightly differently. Both audiences desired more education on the process, both in the tools, the instruction on what they were looking at, how they should approach use of the tool, and even in their discussions. And then ultimately, and this feedback was overwhelming, with statements like quickly input scores and felt rushed, needed more time, all felt rushed. And when we asked a question specifically about the number of meetings, both audiences requested at least 2 meetings, one to review and the other to prioritize, which has an impact on the schedule moving forward when, in particular, some of the boards and commissions at most meet on a biweekly basis, some even potentially quarterly. And with regards to the boards themselves, we were testing a concept of whether to institute a ad hoc committee just during budget time of representatives from different boards and commissions, or actually maintain a full committee review by each of the 4 committees. And at this point, I should probably describe those committees were Parks and Recreation Commission, Budget Advisory Committee, Planning and Zoning Commission, the ETAC, the Transportation Advisory Council, and then, 5th was the Library Commission as well, less so to an impactful degree. And then finally, back over to the tools, both audiences felt that more project information would be helpful and make them feel more confident in moving through the prioritization process and assigning a ranking. And that was actually a lot of the open-ended comments, such as projects seemed scattered and not much logic. I need clarity on projects versus programs. So as we move into some of our observational feedback and then into the recommendations, we'll discuss a little bit about the differences in the projects themselves. So just building upon the feedback that we received through that solicitation and then the 10-question survey, from our technical perspective, the process has a solid foundation. Not only was it confirmed through statements such as it was an improvement from last year, we did see in the discussions internally and externally some of the criteria and tools themselves, the connection to the strategic plan bubbling up in those conversations. It being the first year, it's a pilot. It's a new process and just needs that education and enhancements and refinement, as all processes do for continuous improvement. An important piece really is this compressed time frame that was indicative of this first year and that 6 weeks. What ended up happening was the CIP committees scores and rankings only made it up to the boards and commissions sort of late in their deliberation process. So at least by the second meeting, if not third, if they went over into a third meeting. So there wasn't necessarily the clear intentionality and the clarity of being able to make this step up in the process. The limited effectiveness of process tools on certain funds or funding types. Reflection here is really on, CTF, the Conservation Trust Fund, and Open Space Fund themselves are limited really to parks and recreation activities. So there was less departmental deliberation really related to those funds. And with regards to project types, there were certain projects such as a mandated transfer from, I believe, the PIF or the CPF to the concrete fund that came up as, through the prioritization process, but should that have really needed to be prioritized at all, considering that it is a mandate? I've talked a little bit about the consistency in use and purpose. And finally, the last thing that we really looked at was a little bit deeper dive into the scoring criteria and then the weighting of that scoring criteria, which from our first city council meeting observation, there was much discussion. So we looked at the opportunities for duplication or overweighting, and in our technical assessment that the weighting is complex. The weights varied from 5 to 10 to 20. If you really looked at the criteria that was associated with the different weights, it did create more balance than we often see in capital improvement program prioritization processes between ongoing maintenance and improvement projects. Oftentimes there's a mismatch, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So that the way the weighting occurred created a little more balance than we often see. However, there was some duplication. For example, We have economic impact as its own criteria, but it's also part of the stated connection to the strategic plan criteria, as well as the strategic plan criteria overlapping with quality of life. So some opportunity for redundancy. And then this also showed up in how the definition of fiscal connection to other projects, say federal or state, was defined, as well as leveraging outside funding sources. And finally, and this will be something that I hope that we can discuss at the end of the presentation, it led to multiple inputs into City Council. So you were still receiving recommendations from all 4 to 5 of the boards and commissions, as well as staff, for then City Council to reconcile. So based on that feedback and then our observations, here are the recommendations for both the process and the tools themselves. So as probably was apparent to many, really starting that prioritization process earlier and aligning it with the budget milestones. So as part of the department intake, that is an opportunity for the asset-specific boards, such as ETAC or the Parks Commission, to work with the departments in prioritizing their requests from that departmental perspective. It also allows boards like ETAC that meet quarterly the opportunity to inform instead of just react to the outcome of the process. And then it also allows two months of healthy discussion for the CIP review committee to prioritize and go through the citywide criteria evaluation to rank and to score, and to have that information in front of City Council as an output by the April 25th date, which then can move into the boards and commissions part of the process and allow them at least 2 meetings to deliberate ahead of the June 10th, the 90-day deadline, which I have a graphic that will sort of describe those milestones and timeline in detail. Having a longer timeline also allows for a consistent kickoff on both the tools and role clarity. So is it that staff is really prioritizing the projects, and then the boards and commissions are working on tweaking the budget allocations, and ensuring that each audience understands their influence on each other and what they can expect to see as information moving through. And then finally, and I might go into a little bit more detail here, is really focusing first and right now on PIF and CPF, as well as potentially differentiating the approach by funding type. So specific to PIF and CPF, these are the 2 funds that are most what I would say fungible. They can support the widest variety of projects, from facilities to IT to transportation, which is a bulk of it, but also parks and other capital assets. They also are the ones that have the most multi-departmental influence and interaction. So really those 2 funds are feeling the most pressure, where a prioritization process can be the most impactful. And then related to project type. So I talked a little bit about the criteria and the weighting and the influence of maintenance versus improvement. And I want to define a little bit more here from my standpoint of you all have existing assets, alleys, recreation centers, parks, streets that you need to maintain. And those are always going to be ongoing expenditures that you should invest in. Now, the level of investment might vary year to year depending on spend levels or condition assessments, but that will always be a present need. Then you have improvement projects. So those ongoing maintenance projects are potentially always going to be a multi-year impact on your budget. Then you have improvement projects. Those improvement projects might be for deferred maintenance, so a project that's fallen out of condition that really needs a major rehabilitation or renovation to get back to where you all would like it to be, or something brand new. And those capital projects we often see are on a 3-year life cycle. So a one-time decision to invest in an improvement project will have a multi-year obligation on your budget. It's very difficult to defund a project, obviously, right through in the middle of construction. So I think that the clarity, or at least the incorporation of definition of different project types into the process will also help refine really the impact of the prioritization itself. And then related to the tools and criteria that support the process, really just simplifying it in and of itself. The tool had multiple spreadsheets, names were on one side, information was on another, criteria was on another. So just really simplifying it so that you're looking at one fund, the project, the financials, and then able to make that evaluation as a user. Then really refining some of the criteria to potentially elevate the strategic plan elements in and of themselves. Here you can see economy, safety, sustainability, and neighborhoods, not necessarily the asset-specific one that you have in your strategic plan for necessarily transportation, but some of those strategic plan values as their own standalone criteria, complemented by, I would say, good government, stewardship of taxpayer resources on the use, the service level impact, how it leverages those outside funding sources, and then urgency. You could consider, calling out or elevating a named strategic plan project or readiness. As well, there is the opportunity, I understand you all do an annual retreat every year to refine or set or reset some of the strategic plan values for the next year's budget process. So it can be fluid to reflect the decisions and challenges and dynamisy that is your city. And then finally, there was something called a director ranking on the tool, really redefining that to be department ranking. So the importance of the departmental priority is carried throughout the process. I'd recommend simplifying the weighting just for ease of calculation and clarity and less subjectivity. And then finally, in that budget intake process, better aligning the project intake sheets, the questions that are asked of the projects, to marry with the project criteria for which it will be evaluated. And you all have a great OpenGov system where that seems to be a recommendation that could be implemented quickly, as well as changed each year depending on decisions that are made. And I apologize. I've been battling a cold for about 10 days, so I apologize for my voice, and I hope that you all are able to hear me clearly. I'm trying very hard to articulate. So what do these recommendations look like in practice? This is the current pilot, sort of mapped out in a timeline. You can see CTF, OSF, PIF, and CIF, CPF, the non-enterprise funds, the department review as part of intake, and then the bulk of that CIP prioritization process happening in that 6-week time frame. the individual committees themselves looking and ranking and performing budget allocations all as inputs to the City Council. I will note that you can see the other enterprise funds and other capital boards and commissions on the slide, partly because I felt like it was important as we move into possible refinements to provide consistency across all of your capital improvement fund types and the opportunity to take this process to other funds and then into potentially a multi-year CIP plan, which I'll talk about in closing. So this would, in looking at the recommendations, this would be our application of those in the timeline. You can see Parks and Rec Commission and TAC informing the departmental rankings. It also keeps Parks and Rec Committee working through OSF and CTF to make the recommendations to the city manager and to city council with regards to their bylaws. Moving through the citywide scoring criteria, and then really activating Planning and Zoning Committee and Budget Advisory Committee as those multiple perspectives and the purpose by which those committees actually function. They don't have an asset-specific stake in the budget. They're really there to look at both budget and then alignment with citywide values. So instead of recommending an ad hoc committee, really empowering them in that multi-asset, multi-departmental perspective, to then make recommendations to the city manager and staff that can then reconcile all the information to present a cohesive single budget forward to City Council. All of these aligned with the recommended or statutory budget milestones. So finally, and hope that we can have some discussion today, there is first and foremost maybe a question back to you all as to the role the City Council is interested in playing and how that might influence the final outcomes. Is it a reconciler of all of the various boards and commissions inputs, or as an improver? So where staff has done that work with that input, there's a clear transparency to those decisions to be presented in front of you each budget season. Continuing to apply this process and refining it and changing it to reflect your values. And then last, the relationship of the process on an annual basis to informing a multi-year capital improvement plan. And so in closing with this recommendation in particular, I've heard it referred to as the master plan of master plans. There are cities that take a 3, 6, 12, 20-year horizon. They look at the needs of each of their departments, bringing them together on an unconstrained basis, so fiscally unconstrained. But also they recognize the and analyze the financial risk of their current assets. So what is the financial exposure of the condition of your current infrastructure married with what new infrastructure you'd like to take on? And how does that align with the current revenue sources that you have? So it is both an opportunity to prioritize departmental project, asset-specific project against each other. It's an opportunity to evaluate maintenance versus new. And it's also an educational opportunity to serve as a foundational framework for any future decisions the city might need to consider relating to new revenue sources, pursuit of grants, and or issuing debt. So I think that on a whole, the pilot prioritization process for the capital improvement program that the City of Englewood has taken this great leap in getting started is right on and has a lot of promise to continue to support your needs in the future. So with that, I will turn it over to you all for questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Snyder, for that presentation. I'll open it up to questions from council. Go ahead, Member Noonan-Camp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Snyder, for the presentation, and thank you to staff for working on this. When I brought this idea to the council just about a year ago, after we passed the CIP last year, I appreciate staff's responsiveness to that request, because this final page is some of the questions that I had. We have wonderful master plans across our different departments within the city, but what felt lacking to me was how they talked to each other. And we see a lot of projects that are listed as tier 1, but the question is, are all tier 1s created equal? Or are some tier 1s really more important or more critical to the city than others? And Ms. Snyder, I'd love to get your opinion on, with the new scoring system, do we feel like we have the level of objectivity that we're hoping for to ensure that for lack of a better term, the most important tier 1s are really getting to the top of the funding pile and the other ones can wait a little bit longer?
I think with some refinements, yes. Through some of the deliberations, there wasn't as much activation of the criteria as I think will really help answer that question. But continuing to apply it, and particularly applying it, on a multi-year basis to then inform an annual basis, yes. I think that Englewood will not be alone in the struggle of you have a big tier 1 list, but your annual revenues will only be able to support a portion of those, and the criteria will help align whatever rises to the top also with the vision and values that the city is going. And so it will be better connected to that strategic vision and to decisions that you all as a city council are making.
I appreciate that. It definitely seems like a more sophisticated way for us to go about allocating taxpayer resources in a way that is not only responsible, but really future strategic thinking and quite strategic. A couple points of feedback for me, and I appreciate all the feedback from the boards and commissions. Would have loved maybe City Council to be part of some of that feedback process, because I definitely have some thoughts as well about what we've experienced this year. Definitely think it's a net improvement, but would love for us to make our language and our scoring more consistent across what comes to council. There were some different scores, some different tiers, but we actually never had the visibility into the actual rankings for each of the projects and the programs, which I think would have been really helpful in some of that objective decision making. Also, this last bullet here, I'm quite excited about the multi-year CIP plan. I think that's something that's come up in the 2 years that I've been through this process on council. Is our experience to date has been looking at the funding that we have available within the CIP or in the funds that we have, and then looking at what we have left over in unassigned fund balance at the end of the year and seeing what we can do with it, but really having a better way to predict what our long-term funding will be and how we can create this master plan of the master plans year over year so that we set Englewood up on a much stronger foundation in our infrastructure is something that's a really high priority for me. So I'd like us to have some more of that long-range planning, that consistency, and that visibility into the ranking system is really important. I also just will give one more point of feedback and then I'll yield my time, is the improved process for boards and commissions feels quite important this year. I previously served on the Budget Advisory Committee and then also on the commission or the board that I'm a liaison to. They struggled with this process. They just are not equipped, I think, to give the technical level of feedback that sometimes we're asking of them. And I wonder if there's a way to ask them for more values-based feedback in a more thematic way than some of the technical pieces that they felt maybe a little bit uncomfortable weighing in on or intimidated by. So hopefully we can continue to improve that. But I really appreciate the work that's been done on this and look forward to it continuing and to keep improving.
And if I may, I have two thoughts just to those points. The concept of tiering is often maybe better situated for the multi-year plans, where the concept of specific ranking, rank order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is better applied for that annual process. And there was confusion on tier versus rank and the use of that language through the process. And then finally, with regards to the boards and commissions, there have been other places that have activated their boards and commissions maybe through a scenario process. So after that capital improvement review committee step, there are maybe several scenarios that are built based on different value propositions for then a committee with maybe the different levels of technical prowess related to capital improvement projects to weigh in and maybe make a recommendation that way.
I appreciate that. I think that level of scaffolding would make this project much more accessible to our citizens who are serving in those capacities.
Perfect. Member Russell and then Member Anderson.
Thank you. I actually see things somewhat different from Councilmember Noonenkamp. We are a city government that is supposed to be run by the people, for the people, and of the people. And what I feel has happened, even in this process, is planning and zoning and even the Budget Advisory Committee have defined jobs in the charter itself. Whereas it seems to me like, especially planning and zoning, is to bring forward the list of projects first. It's not to be generated from the staff first. And so what I kind of felt happened in this process is that city staff and the committee that city staff built kind of brought forward what staff wanted. Then Planning and Zoning and the Budget Advisory Committee weighed in on that afterwards. But when the final goal was made, staff made the recommendations that what they had chosen would be the direction we went, rather than Planning and Zoning and the Budget Advisory Committee. So I am a little bit concerned. I'm not saying that we don't need a process. I think we do need a process, but this is not a process that should be driven by city staff. It should be driven from the beginning by Planning and Zoning, and to a certain extent, the Budget Advisory Committee. So I don't know if you can weigh in on some of that. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to sort of reflect on experiences from other places related to the dynamic between boards and commissions and city staff in generating projects. In some situations where you mentioned Planning and Zoning Committee generating that list of projects, the understanding that they may still need to be technically vetted by staff in and of themselves for cost estimation or technical feasibility. And so where you've seen sort of in this process from the recommendation, PRC and or ETAC show up in the departmental generation of what is input into the intake process of that first step. There could be that space, and other cities have gone to their asset-specific boards and commissions, and or if that is the role of planning and zoning to generate those projects at that intake point in time. Based on our experience, we have always seen, though, that dynamic where staff does have that opportunity to evaluate for technical feasibility. There are other places where the master plans themselves that have driven the departmental priorities, the tiers or the needs of projects that go into the budget process. Other cities have sort of stated saying, we ran a planning process that created a master plan or a small area plan or generated the list of projects by which we're pulling from, and a specific board and commission had the opportunity to weigh in at that point in time. And so that connection is still honored. I think the consideration then for the City of Englewood is it, one, both of that influence at that very beginning step of the process? And then I think, does the importance of the step at the end too still be maintained?
I appreciate those thoughts because I do agree with you that even the boards and commissions need staff input, but especially planning and zoning is charged with a charter that they would look at the needs in the city and make the list and give it to the city manager. And that's how the process, I think, is supposed to start. But thank you. I appreciate that information.
Yeah, you bet.
Member Anderson?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Snyder, for the presentation. It's nice to finally kind of see behind the scenes as to how this process worked out this year. And as much as I would like to have a process where we could just kind of turn the crank and out comes the exact right prioritization list for projects, I'm not sure we're ever going to get exactly there, but I think we're moving in a direction that has a little more objectivity to it. And I think Planning and Zoning, Budget Advisory Committee, and staff can all appreciate, as well as City Council can appreciate some of that objectivity as well. I wanted to just speak to the role of City Council, and I know you mentioned our retreat at the beginning of the year, and I'm just wondering, it seems to me that City Council needs to have kind of perhaps a vision-setting role on the front end, maybe at that strategic, planning retreat, and then a kind of a reflective, did we get there, kind of role at the end, whether that, I don't know if reconciler or approver, maybe some of both. If the process has worked really, really well, then hopefully we're getting closer to, a process where less reconciliation is necessary, but more evaluation to see if the plan is actually meeting the goals that we set out to accomplish at the beginning of the year, long before the budget process even started. Does that make sense or help kind of provide some helpful feedback in terms of these final considerations?
I think so. And I have maybe a few additional comments in response. I didn't necessarily hear a question, but I would like to offer maybe a few thoughts based on your statement.
Sure.
Yes. So I think going to the first, let me say, on an annual basis, considering how long capital projects can take to design and build, as well as the cost, the impact or the way to measure from an annual budget cycle will be very incremental, which is why there's this statement at the multi-year CIP plan. I think that is back to Councilperson Russell's opportunity for, the big list of intake, where maybe planning and zoning can influence there. You're able to see the multitude of priorities, how they compare against each other, and set those first foundational values. And then with each annual budget, you're tracking back to that multi-year plan, as well as capturing any changes that you might be experiencing in your city. And that is really where that annual vision setting at the front end of the process and really influencing the criteria each year or tweaking, confirming they're still the same, is that opportunity to where you can see the story, see the thread of values, decisions that the city has being represented in the financial decisions for capital projects, not only now, but also in the future because of that delay into implementation.
Thank you.
Any further questions from members of council? Deputy City Manager, anything else that you are looking from City Council tonight? I know it was mostly informational tonight, but any other direction that you're looking for?
Yeah, thank you. And I know it's getting late and you have several other things on your agenda. So I would, I guess, just ask council, given that we want to give more time to this process next year, however, we do have some time, would you be amenable to staff going back with the feedback you provided to continue working with Ms. Snyder and then to provide a more refined proposal later in the fall to utilize for next spring?
I would be fine with that. I don't see any nodding heads in disagreement with that, so I think that should work.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
Thank
Ms.
you all for
Snyder,
having
go
me.
ahead.
Oh, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
Ms. Snyder, thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you for staying late as well. Deputy City Manager, thank you for your time as well. And yeah, we'll be speaking here soon about this as well. So thank you. And moving on to the next agenda item, we have Hilarie Portell, the Executive Director for the EDDA, Troy Bernberg, the Financial Advisor for the DDA, as well as with Northland Securities. And I think we have a couple of other, we have the Treasurer as well. We got Mr. Nixon, and I know, Amy, you're in the audience as well. So, Hilarie, you got to kick us off, or? Mr. Nixon, good evening.
Good evening, Council. My name is Brad Nixon. I'm the Board Chair for the Englewood Downtown Development Authority, and also with me is Amy Gallegos behind me, Board Chair-elect, Hilarie Portell, our Executive Director for the Downtown Development Authority, and Troy Bernberg, who is our Financial Advisor with Northland Securities. Excuse me. First of all, I wanted to thank you for, I guess, giving us the charge in 2021 to undertake the downtown plan at that particular time, which is what we've been operating on, and it was adopted that particular year. This is now our third budget cycle with you guys. The first year was operating on a $300,000 worth of seed capital that the city provided for us. And this year, we've been operating with a $1.5 million budget, and we're here to talk about next year being a $2.8 million budget for the things that we have encapsulated from the downtown plan. All of this, which has been funded by tax increment funding and a CDOT grant that we've been able to secure, and have been influenced by really the joint focus to implement these things, these key improvements and initiatives in the downtown areas, of which there's 3 downtown areas. As a local business owner, I guess I would like to also thank you for the trust that you've given the board, composed of a lot of civic-minded leaders that are working as board members and that really are working to make a more vibrant, cohesive, and resilient place in the downtown area. Let me hand this over to Hilarie and Troy to give you kind of the rest of the plan and what we're bringing to the table.
Okay, thank you for having us here tonight. It's a very dynamic time in this city, and there's a lot of interest in downtown revitalization. We have been building partnerships and working closely with city departments and other stakeholder groups to implement the vision and goals in the Englewood Downtown Plan. This year, we are investing more than $650,000 in downtown programs and projects, paying off our startup loan from the City of Englewood back to you, and teeing up priority projects throughout the downtown district. In 2024, our proposed plan and budget focuses on programs and projects that advance and improve downtown and its quality of life, to attract and retain local residents, visitors, businesses, and new investment. We'll be doing a quick overview of the EDDA as an organization, what we're set up to do and how we're regulated, the connection to the Englewood Downtown Plan with our 2024 plan, our proposed budget for next year, enhancements over this year, and then we'll have time for questions. The Englewood DDA is a quasi-governmental entity formed in 2021 by downtown voters and this body, the City Council, to implement the Englewood Downtown Plan in partnership with the City of Englewood and other stakeholders. We're a champion for downtown. We must serve a public purpose in our use of public funds. We undertake projects and programs that advance and improve the downtown district and its quality of life. There's 4 categories related to the downtown plan, which I'll go over a little bit more later. The DDA can supplement or enhance the city's standard level of service in the downtown district. We don't replace city services, but we can supplement or enhance them in the downtown district. The DDA is regulated by a state statute. Notably, we are not urban renewal. That's a different state statute. We are about building and improving a downtown district, not eliminating blight. And we have no power of condemnation. There are 20 DDAs in Colorado, and we are the 19th. So one of the newest ones, and off to a pretty fast start. This is the downtown district for the City of Englewood, basically combining 3 specific areas: the Englewood City Station sub-area, the traditional Main Street South Broadway sub-area, and what we now call the Wellness District around Swedish and Craig hospitals along Old Hamden. It's 186 acres and includes 3,000 property owners, business owners, and residents. The DDA is funded solely through sales and property tax increment generated in the downtown district in these 3 areas. Right now, we're only drawing increment from the Wellness District, both property tax increment and sales tax increment in the South Broadway District. Over time, we'll need to draw increment from all 3 districts in order to accomplish the goals in the downtown plan and build out the projects that the board has prioritized. Quick review on how TIF works. A tax increment finance district is activated and a base valuation is set. The city, county, and school district continue to collect the base tax revenue, that's shown in gray on this graphic. If property values are rising, the property tax base for the base will rise as well. DDA programs and projects help generate new tax revenue through customer spending, building improvements, and new development. That new tax revenue, called the increment, shown in blue on this graphic, is then reinvested in more downtown improvements by the DDA. In 2021, downtown voters authorized the EDDA to incur up to $70 million in debt to finance projects over a 30-year period. As a steward of public funds, we strive to spend increment thoughtfully and strategically in accordance with state statute, the downtown plan, and our TIF investment policy. It can be very challenging to project TIF revenue, and we've got some key guidance from Troy Bernberg, who's the Managing Director of Public Finance for Northland Securities and our financial advisor. Troy.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you. I think I last saw you all in February. It's nice to see you all again. Talking about early stage TIF collection for DDAs, I have the pleasure of working with a number of DDAs in Colorado, a lot of them being new. So I've developed somewhat of an expertise with these early stage DDAs and the sensitivity around projecting property tax and sales tax. And really, it's quite challenging for a number of factors that I'll detail here. The first one being an economic factor. So interest rates, we all know, are very high right now. We're expecting them to maybe bump up before the end of the year. And the U.S. consumer continues to be very strong and spend a lot of money in our economy. And as representative of 2/3 of that economic power, right now we're not seeing too much of a slowdown in front of us. It's eventually going to come, whether it comes in the form of a recession or what folks like to call a soft landing. I'm not here to say, but needless to say, we are in a time of some economic uncertainty. And so that's one factor. The second factor is judicial. Okay? There was a Colorado Supreme Court case opening arguments last week that will eventually hopefully determine an outcome about how county assessors evaluate and split incremental valuation between base valuation and increment. So the court case will decide how the assessor splits the increased valuation between that blue area and that gray area. What I've seen in the last, I'll finish my factors here. The third factor is legislative. We, as a state, repealed the Gallagher Amendment in 2020 that then gave the power to change assessment rates to our legislature. There was an effort in 21 that was headed off. In 2022, we have Senate Bill 238 that lowered assessment rates for residential, multifamily, as well as commercial. It was a little more complicated than that, but that's the high level. We also have Senate Bill 23108 that allows jurisdictions to provide a temporary mill levy credit. Okay, in the face of rising valuations, the legislature and the governor subsequently signed 108 to allow jurisdictions to provide a temporary mill levy credit. We don't know which jurisdictions are deciding to do that because they're not supposed to set their final mill levy until the 10th of December. And so with those three factors in mind, we have to be very conservative in how we budget our dollars. We don't know what dollar amounts are going to come in past 2024. We don't have a lot of indications about what those revenues will look like. The county assessor gave a lot of our incremental valuation to new construction, almost all of it to new construction this year. And that's great, but we can't guarantee that same level of construction activity going forward. And so that, for the most part, provides the incremental valuation from which we collect revenues. So with that, we know of few properties that we know will get developed, but besides that, we don't know what's going to happen. Right now, economic conditions, as I outlaid, are stalling a lot of construction and development projects throughout the metro area and throughout the state, frankly. And so that activity might continue and might affect what new projects get built here in your lovely city, and therefore impacts our revenues. So with that, we have to be careful about what obligations, multi-year obligations we take, whether that be a bond sometime in the future or more in the near term, an annual program that would require, funding for that program every single year. We have to be really smart about which programs we decide to fund. And with that, we have to also be thoughtful about what projects, as I just said, construction is increment for the most part. And so we have to be careful to select and understand projects that can generate TIF and where we can participate. We have to have that as a criteria in order for us to have sustainable operations going forward.
Thanks, Troy. The DDA is a small but dynamic organization with an action-oriented board and staff. We have a 7-person board of directors appointed by City Council. They are civic, business, and institutional leaders in town. There are 2 board members from each of the 3 sub-areas and 1 council member representative. Our projects will vary from year to year. Our programs are typically in 2 categories: marketing and supplementary maintenance. The Englewood Downtown Plan is our blueprint. It outlines what we can do and where we can do it. It's divided into 5 sections: economy, jobs, and housing, marketing and programming, public spaces and place enhancements, mobility and transportation, and land use and urban design. Our goals for 2024 are to advance and improve the downtown district to attract and retain residents, local business, visitors, and new investment. Number 2, to create a more connected, cohesive downtown district. We have 3 rather unique areas, and they're not very well connected, both physically in terms of placemaking or in terms of marketing. And 3, lots of short-term and long-term financial and project planning. As Troy mentioned, we're striving to manage our ongoing program expenditures versus our large capital improvement project expenditures. We're defining our large public improvement projects and all sorts of funding sources that we might leverage in order to achieve those over time. We are identifying and leveraging catalyst development projects that could be used to fund public projects. And then we are building an assigned fund balance to ensure operational sustainability, debt service capacity, and risk management. Probably seen some of our marketing around town. It's all about promoting downtown Englewood as an attractive place to live, work, visit, and grow. We're trying to create a sense of positive momentum and community pride. We've got a website, social media, print, electronic newsletters, light pole banners, and we've supported a number of community events this year. In terms of supplementary maintenance, as I said earlier, we can enhance the standard level of city services and supplement them in areas like main streets, gateways, and focal points in the downtown district where people are gathering and experiencing our downtown. We're all about creating a quality downtown customer experience. We want people to feel safe and welcome to live, work, shop, and socialize in the downtown area. Downtown districts also typically take over maintenance of specialty elements or enhancements like holiday lights, planters, things that give downtown a unique identity. In 2024, we'll provide funding for the 10 planters on South Broadway as well as holiday lights during the holiday season. We'll also provide supplementary maintenance working with the Parks Department on South Broadway, Old Hamden, the Lincoln parking lot, the two Paseos, Little Dry Creek Plaza, and Englewood Parkway between Broadway and Cherokee. We employ a vendor called Front Range Services that provides the maintenance work in the downtown area. They have a partnership with the Ready to Work program, which is building a new program here in Englewood, and we'll be working with them to employ at least one Englewood resident who is getting back on their feet following a period of homelessness. The EDDA board has prioritized a number of projects in each part of the downtown district that are recommended in the Englewood Downtown Plan that was developed in 2019 and 2020 in a large community process. They really represent a corridor and placemaking strategy focusing on multimodal improvements, quality of life improvements, improvements that support local business and kind of make downtown a more welcoming, attractive, safe place for everyone. They're all bigger projects that will take multiple years and different funding sources. We expect to leverage our own funding. We can take out bank loans. We can seek grant funding. We can leverage funds with the City of Englewood, and we can pay off bonds issued by the City of Englewood for large capital projects. So in terms of the Wellness District, we're working with the Parks Department on the Old Hamden Complete Streets project that will go into detailed planning and construction in this year and next. We helped with the stakeholder engagement and the grant writing to secure the $7 million Dr. Cog grant to fund that project. We're also contributing $50,000 to a new community park that Craig Hospital is planning on their campus. On the Broadway corridor, we will be kicking off a major focus on South Broadway this fall with a public realm action plan. And that's all about supporting the historic charm and quirkiness of the Broadway corridor, as well as local business through streetscape improvements, hopefully some alley improvements, pop-up activations, and design guidelines to inform adaptive reuse and incremental new development along the Broadway corridor over time. We finished the Paseo project this year. That saved $250,000 on the city's CIP plan, so you can take that one off your list. We are investing in the Little Dry Creek Greenway. So this year we have spent $65,000 on a feasibility study and another $50,000 on conceptual planning for some kind of multimodal surface connection along the Little Dry Creek corridor that also contributes towards stormwater retention in that area. We're also working with the Community Development Department on multimodal and placemaking improvements along the Englewood Parkway corridor, because that could be a catalyst to help some of those large vacant parcels get repositioned and redeveloped over time as well. And then finally, we will be participating significantly in the City Center redevelopment project. There's a national marketing process underway right now. We're watching and looking forward to seeing development proposals come in on that and determining the appropriate role for the DDA to play in that project as well. Our 2024 operational plan is in your packet for tonight. I thought I'd call out a few highlights that really support the Englewood Downtown Plan. In economy, jobs, and homes, we will be kicking off the City Center vacant space activation project this fall and continuing it through next year. It's filling about 20,000 square feet of empty space across the fountain from here with the Redline Contemporary Arts Center, Englewood Historical Society, and who's my third? Oh, yes, the Guild, a local business incubator. So trying to support local artists, local business, and local history in a kind of novel arrangement whereby those organizations will get free rent for at least a 12-month period and potentially longer. They do have to pay for their utilities. The L&R Partners is providing funding to help them with some modest improvements in their spaces. The DDA is providing some funding to help them activate the spaces with creative activities, participating in events in the city center area, and generally keeping things moving. We'll be branding and doing some fun things on the windows as well. Also in City Center, as part of the public financing agreement and the city's affordable housing planning, we will be advocating for housing that's accessible to middle-income workers in the city of Englewood, because we're hearing from downtown employers across the board that that's what they need the most. For marketing and programming, we'll continue event activations along South Broadway as part of the Public Realm project and pop-up events there, and then our normal marketing program that we've got going on now, adding in the South Broadway holiday lights. For public spaces enhancements and placemaking, we'll be focusing largely on South Broadway, as I mentioned earlier, and then expanding our supplementary maintenance program with the Parks Department. For mobility, parking and transportation, we'll be working on the Old Hamden Complete Streets improvements, the Little Dry Creek Greenway trail planning. We're providing local match funding for the Community Development Department. They have secured some significant funding from RTD for microtransit enhancements. And then we'll continue working on downtown multimodal parking with the Public Works Department. For land use and urban design, we expect to undertake select site analyses aligned with EDDA priorities. Our board voted to refer our 2024 proposed budget to you on September 6th of this year. The board will hold a budget hearing and formally adopt its budget following City Council consideration this fall. This budget is similar to last year's with a different mix of projects. It does reflect increased revenue based on the Arapahoe County Assessor's preliminary data and a conservative sales tax revenue projection. Again, we're collecting increment from the Wellness District, both property and sales tax increment, and sales tax increment only in the South Broadway sub-district. We actually will have a decrease in our total expenditures in 2024, largely due to the fact that we'll have paid off the $300,000 loan that we owed back to the City of Englewood. So that was a $150,000 payment we'll make in December of this year. There's a few enhancements in 2024. Our management costs will be going up slightly. Our management costs include a part-time executive director, a part-time administrative coordinator, both of whom are independent contractors, legal services, so we have an outside law firm, and financial services. The enhancements this year reflect increased executive director staff time from 30 to 33 hours a week, increased legal fees associated with any city center type negotiations and a fee increase from the firm, and increased financial advisory fees for our long and short-term planning that I've explained earlier. A little bit of uptick in operations for some IT support. As you know, it's very complicated doing hybrid meetings and virtual meetings, and it takes a lot more IT support than it used to, so we've gone and secured that support. We have a little bit more allocated for our contingency this year to cover any unexpected costs, opportunities, and grant matching funds for a total of $53,500. All of the EDDA funding is invested in downtown programs and projects in partnership with city departments. We're all about leveraging efforts. In 2024, we're proposing to provide additional funding for several city department-led and managed projects as set forth in the MOU between the DDA and the City of Englewood. That includes, under placemaking, the Broadway Planner Project or program, a street tree resin application along South Broadway to several of the trees, adding to the marketing budget the South Broadway Decorative Lights program, and then more microtransit improvement local match funding through the Community Development Department. So that's a total of about $98,100 of funding that will be shared with city departments for programs that they are managing that we'll be part of. As I mentioned earlier, we're building an assigned fund balance. This is very, very important to manage our public funds thoughtfully and pragmatically, and Troy will tell you a little bit more about that.
Sure. So just as the policy document was designed, the fund balance designations in that document are also an intentional roadmap for planning and risk management. The assignment designation is an intention to use these funds for the purposes outlined in front of you. These purposes fall in line with the DDA's plan of development, as well as its operational plans and board priorities. It's important to understand that over a 30-year life cycle of a DDA, over 50, 60, even higher percent of its funds that it collects should be used for projects. Okay, and this is showing that intention that, yes, we were fortunate to get some bump in revenue based on construction only, again, from this last cycle. And so we thought it's our fiduciary duty, it's our duty to the city and to its citizens in the DDA boundaries to follow through on the projects we said we would help realize. And so this is our intention to do so in that regard. You know, Proposition HH is another matter, another judicial matter or legislative matter I failed to mention earlier. I think, you know, while that will lower assessment rates further and actually takes 40 to 50,000 of taxable value off of a property, depending on what kind of property it is. You know, there is revenue volatility that we have to consider. So we have to set money aside for that. We have to set money aside for operational sustainability in the event of inconsistent and unpredictable revenues. You know, it's also important for us, as I open my comments on this slide about, is, you know, we're supposed to be in the business of projects and getting stuff done. And so capital improvement funding is really important to us. But these numbers don't necessarily, they're not a promise to pay, they're an intention to pay. There are a lot of things to flesh out. Part of our policy does insists on the exploration of grant funding. So ultimately, we would like to see some level of that before we start spending our dollars. And then again, for us, debt service obligations, we recognize we have a debt authorization that the voters approved. You know, we want to anticipate that as well and set ourselves up to be the best borrower we can be when that time comes. Oh, in closing comments, because this is the last slide, I'll just share quickly. I've been doing this a long time, 20 years. In most recent years, I've represented about 6 DDAs, either worked with them in my day job or volunteered with more than 6. And it's been really unique to see the EDDA in action. Personally, I think as a third-party professional consultant working with these DDAs in downtown communities, the EDDA really does stand out. And it stands out, in my mind, for its planning and prioritization. I think that provides some context based on tonight's presentation. For its civic-minded and local board, for its enterprising efforts with stakeholders and implementing the plan of development, and for its organizational structure and leadership. In fact, the DDA did get recognized by the Colorado Municipal League and Downtown Colorado Incorporated on a joint mobile tour. So it was really cool to see the Englewood downtown get showcased, to see the DDA get showcased among its 20 peers. It's just something really cool and something that everyone should be proud of.
All right, thanks, Troy. Last slide. What to expect in the future? Our project costs are going to increase exponentially as projects move from planning to construction. Our debt service will increase as we participate in city center redevelopment financing and other project financing. Our management costs will go up some as we expand programming. Typically, DDAs in communities this size have about 3 employees. Right now, we have 2 part-time independent contractors. As Troy mentioned, in late August, we hosted downtown revitalization professionals from throughout the metro area. They were impressed with the vision, energy, and partnership here in Englewood as it relates to our downtown area. We're off to a great start and building strong foundations to make downtown Englewood more economically vibrant, connected, safe, and green. Thank you. And now we're available for questions.
Thank you, everyone, for the presentation tonight. We'll start off with Member Newnenkamp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. It's great to hear an update about what the DDA is up to. And very excited about, I think I heard the 2 kind of big projects that are happening in the Wellness District. Obviously, the Old Hampton Complete Streets project, which we're very excited about, as well as the partnership with Craig on the public park. Something, though, that I hear from some of the residents and business owners in the Wellness District, which is, as you know, in my district, is what are more of the near-term opportunities to activate that area? Because as you know, those other projects are long-ranging, kind of few years out, still capital projects. How do you think about activating that area in the near term?
Well, I'm looking into banners. We don't have any light poles in that corridor, but I'd like to see if we can use some of the Excel posts, particularly around where the local businesses and restaurant cluster is. It's possible we could do some activation in that green space on Old Hampden that's owned by Swedish Medical Center. We did get into discussions with them this year about would they be interested in converting that green space into community space that could be programmed. They are not at this time. They'd like to reserve the right to use that green space over time if they need it for expansion, but they are going to maintain it informally as public space. So it's possible we could work with them to do some programming on that in that area.
That's great. It's great to hear some of the things that are in your mind, because those are some of the questions I get from residents in that area and from business owners. And so it's exciting to hear some of your ideas. And obviously, the big long-term projects, which we know take time, are so meaningful as well. Thanks so much.
Well, fortunately, the Old Hampton improvements is not big and long-term. The detailed planning and construction are funded now through the Dr. Cog grant, so we're looking at about a 24-month period to get those things in.
And as you know, in our world, 24 months is quite quick, but to the citizens, it sounds still like a long way off.
I understand.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So one of the things I see missing from this plan is in the area of safety. One of the most common complaints that I hear from residents these days are concerns, and from business owners, and in particular the business owners who are trying to work in this part of the city. The part of the city that's covered by the DDA is over safety. What, if anything, does the DDA envision in the future for specific safety improvements, whether it be SEPTED or private security or payments for enhanced policing in that area? We saw that. I've seen it in other areas like downtown Denver when they had a major problem on the 16th Street Mall. They were paying a large amount of money for police overtime to ensure that the mall stayed safe. Is the DDA, or does the DDA have any plans to partner on safety issues related to physical safety and the population that tends to travel through this area?
Well, almost everything we're involved in enhances safety in the downtown district, whether it's supplementary maintenance or activating vacant spaces, working with property owners to, like you said, clean up and eliminate crime and nuisance behavior through environmental design. Working with areas like lighting at night in parking lots, alleys along the main streets. That's a big priority in all of our projects. And then any pop-up activations, things that we do to kind of reclaim underutilized spaces, absolutely connects with increased safety in the area.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. My question is just in regard to revenues. You mentioned a couple of times TIF increment related to construction, if I understood that right. Is there no TIF increment related to the sales tax, any sales tax revenue in the wellness or downtown area?
Sure. Yes, Member Anderson, there is sales tax. I was just noting the construction because it was a large number in the assessor worksheet that they provided us on August 25th. Approximately 38 million of new construction in the wellness district. And I just pointed that out because it was an outsized number. And also, we only really got incremental credit for the construction. There didn't seem to be any increase in the valuation from the general market increasing. So that's a note I made because what the assessor is telling me in that worksheet is they're only really giving us credit for increment on new construction. So if there's not new construction, it looks to me that there's a pattern that we would get less increment of property tax in that case.
That's due to this new ruling, or?
Well, we haven't gotten the ruling yet. I suspect it's a conservative approach in anticipation of the court case. But that's just my personal opinion.
On the sale, you talked about the base base revenue increasing along with as the property valuations increase. Is there anything like that with sales tax, or does the base just stay flat on the sales tax?
Yeah, the base sales tax is a little more less nuanced. So yes, it stays the same. There's no adjustment. You should anticipate an adjustment in your base every reassessment cycle, so every odd year.
Okay, and then final question on that: how much new revenue are we expecting from the sales tax increment this next year?
I budgeted quite conservatively, $275,000. That's actually basically flat, Member Anderson, over last year. Again, sales tax can be a little more volatile than our property tax, just based on how our property is assessed and the cycle it uses. And I guess I'm just conservative, and I see the American consumer is saving less, and they are using more of their credit card debt. And for me, that usually goes to sales tax, impacts sales tax first. So I was pretty conservative in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the DDA? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate what you all are doing. And so I just wanted to, pretty much the Mayor Pro Tem asked the question that I wanted. But I think there's another problem that happens, and the things you're doing will activate it in the daytime. But I even got a call this morning that was saying somebody got up and ran to Stinkers like at 4:30 in the morning and was appalled at how many homeless were out on the streets committing crimes. But by the time they went home and the sun was coming up, they all disappeared. So, and I'm not suggesting that this is your responsibility only, because I think it's something that we need to partner together with the city, not just you. But I just want to make certain that you are discussing those things, because this is a problem and the people in this city are very concerned about it. So I think you need to be thinking too, how can we partner with you to make sure things get done as well?
Thank you. And it is an ongoing issue and something we're discussing, and a topic in every project we're involved in right now. How do we design places in an inclusive manner? How do we design places that don't attract nuisance behavior during the day and the night? And how do we interface with the Tri-City Homeless Coalition and its work? For example, the interim strategy we're participating in City Center right now includes All Health Network, as well as private security, the Englewood Police Department, the DDA activating the vacant spaces and providing event funding in the city center area. It's a comprehensive effort to stabilize an area with very, very high vacancies and a consistent level of safety concerns and nuisance behavior.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, and just one other thing, businesses recently have left, like Big Lots and Hobby Lobby, and also Colorado Retina. So if we keep bleeding businesses, I mean, how are we going to stop that in the short term?
Well, each business closure has a reason behind it. The large format stores are closing across the country depending on their economic situation and what's going on in retailing generally. Sometimes businesses close because somebody's retiring or somebody died or the family has made another decision. So I always want to kind of get at what is the cause of the closure. Then we start looking at how do we help that property owner reposition that property and think about their opportunities, right? So part of the reason we are pursuing the Little Dry Creek Trail project, for example, and the Englewood Parkway enhancements is to provide that kind of trunk infrastructure of multimodal and new amenities that add value to those property owners and give them a way to think about, well, maybe we could do a residential community here, or maybe we could do local community serving retail instead of large format retail. We get into a discussion with the property owner on, have you thought about using your property in a different way? So you can use these public investments and these improvements and these quality of life improvements to really engage with property owners on, what other opportunities might there be for you now that we're setting a new vision and working with the city on new zoning and putting new amenities in place. That gives you some new options.
Thank you.
Member Anderson? No, still on? All right. Any further questions from members of council? Member Woodward?
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Going back to your Englewood Downtown Plan Connection slide, under the public spaces and enhancements and placemaking, you talk about the Lincoln parking lot and also underneath that, mobility, parking, and transportation. I'm just wondering if you've gotten far enough into that planning to be considering things like EV chargers in places for EVs to set up and charge?
Yeah, we've been participating in the EV master planning effort that the Sustainability Department is running this year. So consideration about location of EV chargers, not just on parking lots, but also corridors. Could we fit them in along Old Hampden or South Broadway in the city center area? Those are going to be really important amenities that allow for people who are using electric vehicles to come and stay and spend time in downtown.
That's great. Glad to hear it. Thank you.
Anything else for members of council? Everyone from the DDA, it's been a pleasure working with you over the past few years. Thank you very much for the kind words as well, Mr. Bernberg, in terms of just how we compare to other DDAs that you worked with in the past. So, and I just appreciate all the work that went into this budget and all your participation in every single meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item, we have Director Jackie Loh here to discuss the update to August. Good evening, Director Loh.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I will present the 2023 August General Fund financials by revenue expenditures with you tonight. This is our General Fund revenue. Throughout August 2023, the city's general fund revenue totaled $45.9 million, which is 71.4% of budgeted revenue and $2.57 million higher than the same time last year. Major line item for August 2023, the city has received $8.6 million property tax. Of that total, $5.09 million went to the general fund, $817,000 went to EDDA, and the rest went to the debt service. Another major line item is sales use tax. Total $28.1 million combined sales use in marijuana, which is $1.88 million higher than the same time last year. The collections and volunteer disclosure agreements total $76,000 at the end of year-to-date August. And we have major variances in license permits because 2022 we had a few more large building permits, charges for services revenue, The increase was largely due to IT cost allocation for software licensing directly attributed to the enterprise funds. For investment earnings, $759,000, higher than the same time last year because rising interest rates. Let's take a look at the top 11 revenue sources. You can see the comparison year-to-date 2023, August 2023 to the same time last year. We added the refunds back to this slide. So you can see this year we'll have returned 1,000 sales use taxes compared to the same time last year, 204,000. We'll have a reserve for sales tax refund, 2.1 million. Let's take a look at expenditures. This is expenditures by departments. Across all departments, part of the variance is due to the 5% salary increase for all groups, additional 2% inflationary increase approved by council in August 2023. Another line items for public works, police, and parks and rec, and library. The increase is largely due to the internal billing for internal service fund and also annual vehicle maintenance and the surf charges. So you can see year-to-date we had total 40.33 million expenditures, 62.2% total budget expenditures, 2.7 million higher than the same time last year. All the one-time expenditures are subtracted or added back to the expenditure line item. Here's another way to review our expenditures by major categories: personnel, commodities, contractual services, capital, and debt services. You can see the increase by each category. This is a slide to show operating surplus. At 2023, we had operating surplus of 5.57 million compared to same time last year, 5.9 million. But 2022 numbers was subtracted one-time revenues and expenditures. This is a slide to show the general fund transfers in and transfer out. For 2023, we transferred 2.17 million to fund the Dartmouth Bridge and 60,000 for the new employee related to IT costs, and 1 million last year council approved to use unassigned fund balance to support CIP. So the total net transfer out, 3.9 million. This is the slide to show the fund balance composition. Let's take a look at the right-hand column, the second line, net change in fund balance. This 2.47 million include the transfer out of the 3.9 million and the operating surplus in the 5 million. So the 2.47 million net change include one time. Then we also break down the fund balance by restricted by funders, committed by council member, and unassigned fund balance is the last line. So Tabor, 3% of revenue is restricted by law, 2.1 million. Then later, 95,000 is committed by council. At one time, we're asking council if they would like to uncommit this balance, they will return to unassigned fund balance. At the time, the decision was after EVE dissolution, we'll transfer net assets back to our general fund. That ARPA funding, you can see this restricted by funders. We still have $360,000, but we allocated $97,000 for the homeless project to the Arapahoe County earlier this year. We may request additional probably $78,000 for Littleton for our portion for the Tri-County City homeless project. Now you can see the stadium district refund, the number was decreased from 1.1 million to 502,000 because at the end of August, we spent down the entire 617,000 included in our budget. So we unrestrict the balance from restriction to the unassigned fund balance. And today we just received an email from the Metro Football Stadium District asking for a report to account for how we spend down the money on youth-related activities. So based on the actual performance at the end of August, We still have 12.7 million unassigned fund balance. This concludes the presentation for tonight. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much, Director Loh. Any questions for members of council? I'm not seeing any questions, Director Loh. Thank you very much for the financial update to August.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good evening. All right, everyone, are we good to continue or? Yep. Perfect. So we're moving on to agenda item 9. This is the approval of ordinance on second reading. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the only ordinance that we're taking up for a vote tonight is the second reading for case 2020-09, the Unified Development Code, so that's CB 52. We have Planning Manager Brian Isom, as well as Director of Community Development Brad Power here for us tonight. Good evening, Mr. Isom. Not sure if there's much for you to state on this one since it is second reading, but anything you want to add?
For the sake of brevity, no. I think we've presented this quite a few times to council, so we're just here to answer questions if you have them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Isom. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve CB 52?
The city attorney's rung in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mayor, thank you.
Yes.
Just for purposes of the record and for the minutes, I would like to note that it is 10:10 p.m. and we just started the action portion of the meeting that you designated for the special meeting, which is CB 52, which was why this was designated for a special meeting.
Thank you so much, City Attorney Niles, for that. Any further questions for members of council? All right, seeing none now, can I get a motion to approve CB 52?
I move to approve CB 52.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Noonencamp. Any further comments? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. In reading the charter and planning and zoning's description, it is very clear that any amendments to any land use policy needs to go back to planning and zoning. And I am imploring this council to make sure that we send this back to planning and zoning. Therefore, I make a motion to send it back to planning and zoning.
Thank you, Member Russell. You made a motion on the table. Could I get a second? I'm not seeing a second for members of council. All right. All right, perfect. So without a second, Member Russell, we will not have a vote. Go ahead, Member Russell.
Okay. So seeing there is no second, this council is violating the charter. It is very obvious that this whole scam was pushed forward to impact the developers in this city. We have eliminated all of the checks and balances on this. This council will bear the responsibility of disobeying the charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Members of the public, if you please keep it down. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
There's a principle of law called ridiculous result, and the city attorney may be able to elaborate on this more. But basically what the principle of law called ridiculous result says is that if a law is written in such a way that it results in a ridiculous result, it can't be enforced. So if Member Russell's interpretation of the P&Z Commission's role is correct, and I don't see that it is, it would result in the ridiculous result because we would send our modifications back to P&Z. They would either approve or disapprove them, and then they would send them back to us in the form that they desired, which is the form that they sent them to us in the first place. We would be left without authority to make modifications. We would be stuck in a constant circle. Ultimately, the authority to make an ordinance lies with the city council. The way this law reads, the charter provision reads, it says explicitly, the recommendations of the commission shall not be binding on the council. The effect that Member Russell is asking for makes the recommendations of P&Z binding on the council. So that would be where the charter violation would lie, not with us here taking something that P&Z has already heard, modifying it, and approving it in its modified form.
Would you finish reading that paragraph? Thank you.
Yes. So Charter 58, starting from the place where I started, the recommendations of the commission shall not be binding on the council. However, no general city plan, nor zoning ordinance, nor any modification, amendment, or revision thereof shall be considered by the council unless the same shall have first been submitted to the commission for its examination and recommendation. The commission shall conduct public hearings as they deem necessary. This entire package has already been reviewed by P&Z. They have rendered their recommendations to council. Council has modified those recommendations, and we've conducted a first vote. My opinion is this process complies with the charter. We heard the city attorney weigh in on that in the first reading. I don't cede that, unlike failure to appoint, say, a seventh member of this council in the event of a vacancy, that this is a direct violation of the charter.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further comments from members of council? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp?
Aye.
Member Kolnick?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Nay.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward?
Nay.
Member Woodward?
Nay.
Mayor Sierra?
Aye.
Let the record show 4 ayes and 3 nays. The 3 nays being Member Russell, Mayor Pro Tem Ward, and Member Woodward.
Thank you so much, City Clerk. Moving on now to agenda item 10. This is reports from boards and commissions, from council liaisons. Any further, any updates from any boards or commissions? Not seeing any. Moving on to council members' choice. Anyone have anything to add tonight? Go ahead, Member Noonenkamp.
I will be brief. I just wanted to note that in the past 2 weekends, I have attended 2 neighborhood events in my district. One was a kickoff to fall party this last weekend with the Old Town and Hawthorne neighborhoods, and the week previous was the 4th annual Chalk Festival in Arapahoe Acres. And both of those neighborhood events received funding from the city through our Neighborhood Resources Program and spoke so highly about what that funding enabled them to do to bring their community together. And so just a huge congratulations to staff and how that program continues to benefit the community. And none of that would be happening or useful at all if we didn't have wonderful neighborhood leaders who are willing to invest their own time and their energy to make that happen. So just a reflection for this council about how that is being lived out in the community. I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you very much, Member Noonenkamp. Member Russell.
Thank you. I have I want to get a couple of things on the public record. 4108, and I believe, actually, I think it's 4108 and 4110 South Logan. That project is not legal under the current planning and zoning. It is built from side lot to side lot and from the front lot to the back lot. It might be legal under the new Unified Development Code, but that's not legal yet. And the neighbors in that block are rightfully unhappy. So what do we do when a project has been built that violates the law?
Thank you, Member Russell. So 4108 and 4110 South Logan.
Yes.
So right now you're stating that right now you're stating that the project or the development that's under proposal does not adhere to current zoning laws, but potentially could adhere to.
Correct. There are two separate addresses in an R1C area on 2 lots that are made for a single family dwelling.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. City Manager Lewis, is this something that we could have community development look into and provide a response?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I received the question on this on Friday, and community development is looking at it. The preliminary report from the building official was that the lot was large, it was subdivided, and these are 2 new legal lots. We're confirming the exact square footage now. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis, and you'll just provide a response back to City Council once we get it back. Thank you. Member Anderson, is there anything that you had to add? No. All right, moving on now to, I see no other lights, so city manager's choice.
Thank you, Mayor. That snuck up on me a little sooner than I expected. If you'll indulge me for just a moment. I wanted to touch on a few things. First of all, we had a good tour with Arapahoe County today. They put together a tour of elected officials to talk about affordable housing. So we looked at several sites in Sheridan, Englewood, and Centennial, and what each city is doing. Had some good conversation with them about that, and are encouraged that the county is really trying to engage in this work. Also wanted to report that city staff has been actively working to really solicit funding for outside funding for city projects. So a couple that we're working on right now, we have just been awarded an RTD grant for $300,000 per year for 3 years. That will go to serve as our funding for the trolley service, really alleviating a lot of burden on the general fund. In addition, that will allow us to expand trolley services that are currently operating. We also got notification of a recommendation from DOLA this week to fund $1.6 million towards the Tri-Cities Homelessness Navigation Center. And Bridge House, Ready to Work, has been soliciting that funding, but with the support of Tri-Cities. So I want to thank Deputy City Manager Tim Dodd for his help helping Bridge House with that application. Our formula for affordable housing units over the next 3 years has been accepted by DOLA. That will qualify us for additional funding for affordable housing from the state fund, which voters in the state approved year before last, I believe it was. And so that's Prop 123 funding. In addition, we received our check last week from Arapahoe County Open Space for Phase 2 of Bates Logan. That totals $1.26 million and to fund the renovation, second phase of renovations at Bates Logan. And then lastly, a lot of our staff, particularly in Public Works, have been working very closely with Arapahoe County to get us over the threshold for a disaster declaration of FEMA funding that will hopefully fully fund or mostly fund that Oxford sinkhole and any other damage that we had to mitigate as part of the flood that we experienced a few months ago. So just really want to thank staff for all of their hard work and really trying to aggressively go after funding for this community to save our taxpayer dollars. And I'm glad to answer any questions about that.
Thank you very much, City Manager Lewis. Any questions for City Manager Lewis? I appreciate all the work that you guys have put into trying to get the federal funding for this. I know that this is something that you guys have been discussing since it started or since the sinkhole appeared. So just really appreciate all the work that you guys have put towards that. So yeah, just definitely keep us posted on how that turns out. I guess I do have a question regarding the trolley service. Is that still status quo? Are they still just going to be, are we still looking at providing the same level of service, same level of hours, same destination points as part of that grant that we received or additional funding?
Thank you for the question. Yes, with the new funding, what we're going to be doing is piloting and looking at ways to expand that service. One thing that's already been tossed around, I think it was part of our application, was Saturday service, which we don't currently have, I believe, as well as extended hours service. With the shifts that we have at both Craig and at Swedish, the longer we can go in the day, the more shifts get covered and allows more people working at those hospitals to utilize those services to get over to the wellness district. So it's definitely going to help us fund expanded service.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. And I know I had a conversation with one of the city council members in Sheridan that would like to see the trolley expanded to River Point. Obviously, that would take additional level of funding that we would need to acquire, but Sheridan is definitely interested in piggybacking off of that as well. So, all right. Go ahead, Member Noonekamp.
Mayor, were we going to deliberate on task force appointments tonight as well?
That's right. We still have that discussion forthcoming. So any other questions for City Manager's choice? And thank you for the reminder, Member Noonekamp. I did not write it down, but yes, we still have to, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Member Woodward.
Yeah, going back to the transit with Sheridan, I don't, I guess I have a different point of view there. I don't know why we would be involved in bringing transit sales tax from Englewood citizens to the city of Sheridan. As opposed to keeping it within our community. Now, I understand it's Arapahoe County and it's a whole county type transit deal, but that one sounds a little bit backwards to me. I think with that development, River Point development, we've done enough. I mean, a lot of that land underneath that is or was ours and made it possible. So I don't know. I would not be too quick at the draw to be sending sales tax to Sheridan. That could be in Englewood.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Member Russell?
Thank you. Mayor, I would like to meet early next week to discuss this instead of staying late. I'm tired of staying this late all the time. 10:30 is late enough.
Thank you, Member Russell. Real quick, I do want to just talk to Member Woodward's point. I guess the reason why it's being discussed is that there are well, it's a transit service, right? We're trying to provide mobility service to those that aren't able to get around town or need additional mobility service to get around town. So the idea here is just to provide those same level of mobility services to the shops within River Point, within Sheridan. So it was just a conversation with one council member from Sheridan. Obviously, the funding is not there at the moment, but it was just something that we would discuss for, those within, some of the areas that are part of that corridor. So, members of council, there has been an ask to postpone this conversation as until next Monday. Anyone still want to have the conversation tonight? I don't expect it to go very long, but Member Nunkamp?
Just for clarification, don't we make the appointments next Monday? Would we be able to do that? I'm just curious how the timeline would be affected.
Correct, Member Nunkamp. So we would make the appointments next Monday. So I think the preference is that we would have like an idea of who should be appointed, and then we would vote on it. I think that's the preference, is that the city clerk would like to have that information prior in order for us to actually vote on the appointments.
Considering that that's what we communicated to all the applicants tonight, that we would communicate to them this week, and that we would deliberate tonight, if we can do it quickly, I think it's worth just knocking it out in a few moments, unless we think it's going to be protracted.
Thank you, Member Nunkamp. Member Anderson?
Yeah, I'd like to deliberate tonight as planned. I don't think it will take too long.
Thank you, Member Anderson. And just for reference, I think I see 5 appointments or 5 seats open, 2 of which may already be filled since there's only one, Mr. Whitaker and Mr. Phillips are both on that section. So, Member Russell?
Can we get all council members to weigh in?
Sure. Any other council members would like to weigh in terms of whether or not to have this discussion tonight or not?
Yeah, I'd be
Go ahead,
okay if
Member.
we had it tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Member Kolnick. Mayor Pro Tem?
I don't relish late meetings either, but I have no objection to continuing tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So let's just, we'll quickly just run through this. Are we okay with having an affordable housing developer, Mr. Whitaker there? For the private sector, I believe there's still a second business owner that's still available. We did not seat any the last time around, so Mr. Phillips to fill one of the seats. I think last time around, we discussed having Mr. Gates fill the second seat as a business owner. But that's my recollection from the meeting. Member Anderson?
Yeah, I'm still interested in seating Steve Yates.
Thank you. Member Nunkamp?
I have no objection to that.
Perfect. Same here. I don't have any objection. Mayor Pro Tem, Member Kolnick, go ahead.
Yeah, I have no objection to that either.
Okay. Perfect. And then for the renters, we do have one renter currently seated. We stated 3 renters total. So any nominees for the seat for the remaining 2? Go ahead, Member Woodward.
I liked our first interviewee, Amber Reyes, for one of those seats.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Member Nooncamp?
I agree with Member Woodward. Ms. Reyes was my first choice as well. One thing I wanted to call out is that when we allocated the 3 renter spots for the task force, we did specify that we would prefer to have one at least from an actual affordable housing development. And Ms. Reyes, I believe, is the only applicant who noted that she has lived in an affordable housing context before. And so I think that combined also with our desire to have someone from the school district, not only her experience working there, but then also having children in the district, makes her quite a powerful member of the task force. Should have a lot of input from her life experience that I think would be helpful.
Thank you, Member Nooncamp. I too agree with Ms. Ray's appointment. Really felt her interview was strong and her viewpoint would be much needed on this task force. So any disagreement there for now? But go ahead, Member Anderson.
I would be happy actually with almost, I think, any of the candidates, but my top 2 were Andrea King and John Hurst. But I can definitely, sounds like we have 3, I can definitely get in support of Amber Reyes as well, but I think my second choice would be Andrea King.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Russell, go ahead.
Actually, I think Sophia King did an amazing job on her interview.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Woodward?
I would be in agreement with, what was her name, Sophia King?
Yep. Thank you so much, Member Woodward. Member Kolnick?
Yeah, I would second Amber Reyes, and I would actually agree. Sophia King had a really great background, not only in her time in New York City, but also her experience, as she's come here to Denver, her professional background here. And I think the fact that she's worked in restaurants a lot in her life would be a really great skill set to have on the task force.
Thank you, Member Kolnick. Anyone else want to weigh in? I'm torn between the next one, so go ahead, Member Noonencamp.
I just want to state on the record that I was very impressed by all of the applicants that we had this evening, and the city would be well served by any of them, and I'm so grateful for them taking the time to apply. I had Andrea King as my number 2, but could definitely go with Sophia King as well.
Thank you, Member Noonencamp. I felt the same way. Very strong applicant pool. Very sorry to Ms. Kalk that had to leave early and unfortunately with the technical issues was unable to interview. Feel terrible that occurred tonight, but with the strong candidate list, I had Ms. King as number 2 as well, but Ms. King, well actually there's 2 Kings. Andrea King and then Sophia King, but I'll be happy with Sophia King as well on the board. So I think that gets us to majority there, but anyone else want to weigh in with anything different? So I'll go ahead and add Sophia King to the second slot. Anything else for members of council? Go ahead, Member Woodward. Your mic.
I'm sorry. I was pushing something there, but it wasn't the right button. Corey Whitaker from Habitat. I know I've worked with Habitat and volunteered with Habitat, done ribbon countings with Habitat. And they've done a lot of work up on the Hill in the past. And I think they're a great organization. So, and Corey seemed to be 12 years as a director of real estate, or at least working his way to that. I think is somebody that I'd be interested in.
Didn't we already decide to appoint him?
I don't know.
Oh, we didn't?
Did I miss it?
Well, I stated there's no one else that actually put in for the affordable housing developer, so I obviously he had a very strong interview, but by default also it's just seems that Mr. Whitaker would be part of that seat. So I felt the same for Joe Phillips and Mr. Yates, and then adding Mr. Whitaker as the affordable housing developer. So does anybody have any disagreement with that? don't see it. So
You said, didn't you say, Mr. Whitaker, at the very first, you opened with that one, correct?
yes, correct.
Okay.
Perfect. So I guess just for the record, we have Ms. Reyes and Ms. Sophia King for the two renters under residents, Mr. Whitaker for the affordable housing developer, and for the private sector, there's going to be two business owners, Mr. Phillips and Mr. Yates from the first round of interviews. And with that, everyone, we are now adjourned. We'll see you all next week. Have a good evening.